Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto x Grimmjow Jaegerajaquez Bleach crossover part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Move. They swerved through the debris. Faster. They jumped over a fallen citizen of Konoha. 5 tired humans treaded loudly on the dirt as they sprinted down the alleyway before making a sharp left. One skidded at the corner before collapsing to the earth, their skin ripping and blood dribbling from a newly made cut on their leg as they wailed. The other 4 stopped, looking back, breathing heavily. Go! Go! The pinkette shouted at the others, waving at them to move on. The 2 children clutching to the other teenager sobbed loudly, protesting, before gripping the brunette's wrist even tighter. Go, Ten! The brunette weakly nodded, sweat outlining her eye and cheek as she watched her friend head back to nurse the fallen child at the corner. Hardly a second passed before she was off again, leaving behind her companion and hopefully the madness that was spreading to the rest of the village from behind. They came quickly and suddenly. And on top of their haste appearance, it seemed as though not everyone could see them. How could they not? They were. A tug on her arm brought Tenten back to reality, along with a sudden and loud crash nearby that caused the entire earth to shudder. She halted instantly, pushing Chakra into her feet to keep firmly in place as she allowed the other 2 survivors to cling to her for safety. The tremor quickly subsided. Come on, Tenten whispered through dry lips, brown eyes narrowing in concern as she looked down at their mud-caked faces. Let's go. The female child, who had blonde-turned-brown hair, wet dirt sticking to her locks, burst into tears, stomping her feet and shaking Tenten's wrist. What about Sakura? She screamed, pellets streaming down her cheeks. The trail became defined against her dirty skin. She let out a piercing shriek as the other child, a boy, whacked her across the head while water leaked from his own eyes. Stop! Stop! The girl protested, holding up an arm. We have to Huey! He berated. Stop, Tenten whispered hoarsely, craning her neck to the male child. He stopped instantly, widening his blue eyes at her. The liquid in them shimmered as he prepared to let another onslaught of tears go. Hush! Hush! The brunette ninja felt her heart clench as she squatted down and pressed a callous finger to his lips, quickly stopping the sadness. You need to be brave, okay? Be brave, Raichi. You'll need to help protect everyone else as well when we get there, okay? The boy nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes with his palms. I'm so Idaoi, he muttered. Midori's tears didn't stop flowing as she yelled out that she wanted Sakura again, her small hands and fists as she whacked at Tenten's shoulder viciously. She clearly didn't hear him. Stop! Raichi grabbed both of the blonde's chubby hands and fought against her strength as she shook her head from side to side, her tears not ceasing. Stop, Daoi! I'm here, Kay? Tenten tried not to smile as he attempted to do just what she had asked him to do. She knew that it would inspire him in the future. Midori, she whispered, pressing her hand against the child's back. Midori, Sakura will be fine. She'll find us. The girl stiffly halted her movements and blinked rapidly, ridding the tears that were caught in her lashes. Really? She asked, peering up at the brunette ninja through her blonde bangs and lidded eyes. The weapons mistress nodded slowly, Raichi following her movements before letting go of the girl's fists and wrapping an arm around her tiny shoulders and patting her. She seemed to blush, but it was hard to tell under all the mud sticking to her skin. Now we need to go find the others as well, Tenten told, straightening. She looked down the alley, both directions, but lingered on the way from behind, hoping that she'd see Sakura with the other boy come through the clouding dust. Come on! She grabbed both of the children's grubby hands and pulled forward, hinting that it was time to move. Let's go. Hokage! A voice yelled from outside the door, followed by some loud knocking that made the wood groan. That was all the warning the elderly women got before it suddenly burst open, the door hitting the wall on the other side with a resonating bang. A Chunin stumbled in, hair in disarray and his chest heaving as he panted. This better be good, Tsunade stated, her honey eyes tracing over the battle plans to oppose the current attack on her village. And it better be worth my door. Lady Tsunade! Shizen shouted indignantly. The Hokage paid no mind as she lifted her gaze from her table and onto the disheveled ninja in front of her. Her eyes narrowed dangerously as she felt the floor beneath her quiver ever so slightly. Her fingers tightened beneath her palms. What is it? The loud chatter from the group of strategists scattered throughout the room adjacent to the library faded to a hushed banter as few of them listened in. They're coming in from the west too. The words barely left the Chunin's lips before Tsunade slammed her palms on the table, causing everything on it to shake and topple over. Ink flooded the top and splayed across the floor, followed by an array of papers. The blonde woman didn't say a word, just turned and left the room swiftly, her heels clicking on the tiles. Shizen followed silently behind her. In her wake, the strategists resumed plotting. Tsunade stalked angrily through the barren streets. Many of the survivors sought refuge in the Hokage mountain, believing it to be the most secure place. That was 3 days ago, when the attacks began. Only a quarter of Konoha made it to the tunnels there before several of the entrances collapsed after a vicious fissure. Now they were stuck there and no one else could help them until it was all over. Some had vacated to the forests around Konoha, and many had headed straight to the Forest of Death, hoping that the creatures in there would dispose of the invaders. She didn't know how well that went, but at the moment, most of her villagers were scattered in all directions, while the village itself was being torn apart. Much of the south wall and buildings were demolished, done on the first day of the attack, and until now, that was the only direction they'd come in. They had often left, but they always returned. It pissed her off. It was difficult to summon ninja as well, and she had wondered how many were still around, fighting. She also wondered how many citizens were still within Konoha, just hiding. She growled as she punched through a wall, rock and rubble blooming away from the point of impact as dust fogged her vision. Stepping over the collapsed wall, she walked on, hands and fists with nails burying into the skin. It was going to be hell to clean up, if there was even anything left to rebuild. Sakura sneezed as she ran through the dusty cloud surrounding all sides of her. She had almost dropped the injured boy, but she gripped him around the shoulders and knees even tighter, just as he curled his dirty fingers into her pink clothing. His wound was deep, and she had neither the tools nor energy to heal it. It was just bad luck that he had landed on a shard of glass, and if had she known how bad it was, she wouldn't have told Tenten to go on. She was lost and tired, but she refused to give in. The ground shook and she pressed herself against the wall of the alley, tucking her head into the child's chest as more dust fell from above. Swallowing and licking her lips, she pushed herself off the wall as soon as it was safe and jogged down the alley, glad to finally see another corner with a sheen of light hitting the ground. Her blood froze suddenly, and Sakura stopped instantly, her heartbeat quickening as she saw the light disappear. Releasing a sharp breath, she pressed herself against the wall again, this time on the side that the alley turned. Moistening her throat again, she lowered herself to the ground, careful not to nudge the boy's bleeding leg. She had tried to slow it before, but the bandages, that were from her clothes, were now soaked red. She inhaled and exhaled continuously as she watched and waited for the shadow to disappear, but all she got was a loud purr in return, and the air lodged in her throat in result. The child moved, opening auburn eyes. His small lips parted to make a sound, but Sakura pressed a slender finger to her lips. Quiet. Fear flashed in his orbs as he bit his lip and stuffed his head back into her shoulder, almost nudging her arm away from her chest so that he could nestle into her armpit. She breathed out slowly and shakily as she began to move back the way she had come. She preferred to go the long way around, if she could, than to meet this invader. Her feet glided across the dirt quietly as she inched further and further away. She was almost unable to see the corner through the dusty air as she took another step back. A hand suddenly clamped around her mouth and she squealed, her noise muffled as she whacked at the offending arm. Sure, a voice whispered in her ear. Relax. She didn't. Sakura, it's me. Just the fact that this person knew her name was enough, and this time she melted. Her spine, that was straight for the last half an hour, finally bent as she collapsed into the arms of the male behind her. She was so tempted to close her eyes and fall asleep, but she didn't. She was too tired to do that. Her head propped against his shoulder, she groggily gazed up but saw nothing but a nose poking out over a high collar and black sunglasses. Shino. His hand left her mouth, and he slid his arms around her waist, lifting her up into a sitting position with her back to his chest. He did so carefully as not to disturb the apparently unconscious boy in her lap. His eyes narrowed. Sakura sighed in relief and content. Thank Kami? Sakura. I won't be able to carry you and the boy, the Aburame whispered back, his breath hitting the shell of her ear. She was instantly alert, her sight dropping to the boy. With her limited knowledge of medical jutsu, she checked his vital signs before relaxing slightly. He was alive, but he passed out. She groaned softly as she attempted to lift him up, only for the muscles in her arms to give out and cause the child to tip. Shino caught him quickly, maneuvering him so that he was holding the young boy bridal style. Blood loss. His leg has glass in it, she hurriedly explained, realizing that they were indeed still in danger. The Aburame nodded. Kiba is not too far. I fear I may also bring danger to us. What do you mean? Sakura asked. She hoisted herself up, using Shino's side as help. I do not have time to explain. Soon he was cut off as the alleyway wall was suddenly blown apart, rock thrown everywhere and dust clouding the already thick air. Sakura coughed loudly, her ears ringing as she grabbed Shino's elbow. Lead the way! She screamed, feeling the earth beneath her quiver once again. They were off, streaming down the narrow way with an invader following closely behind, its movement causing the entire ground to shake uncontrollably as its pace quickened. It was beginning to get difficult for her to remain balanced, especially since she was already exhausted. Kiba is not far. Make it to him and he'll carry you the rest of the way. Shino shouted back, his pace hastening. Sakura tried to keep up. Easier said than done. She wanted to scream but found that she didn't even have the energy to talk anymore. Her legs felt like jelly as the two jumped onto a stand then onto a roof. Her thighs ached with pain as she landed on the solid roof and she teetered as the invader moved faster in from behind. Puffing loudly, her mind began to sway and her thoughts shifting indiscernibly. I'm running purely on fear and hope, she noted barely, eyelids drooping. Her vision blurred as Shino jumped across to another roof. The Aburame paused and looked over his shoulder, eyebrows pointed inwards as he analyzed her condition. She couldn't make the jump on the little energy she had left. She barely had any to even run. Plans flittered through his mind. What to do? Gritting his teeth, he placed the boy as gently as he could onto the roof and leapt over to Sakura again, his heartbeat increasing as the black invader zeroed in on them. Grabbing her securely by the waist, Shino flipped forward, narrowly dodging the landing of a heavy punch. The roof shattered to pieces and he lost his footing as it trembled. He skidded on his back for a few seconds, his skin tearing and burning. He let out a groan of pain, before he slammed a foot down onto the rubble and propelled himself ahead, onto another roof. He landed heavily, quickly kneeling to keep a secure crouch. Sakura was limp in his arms, unconscious. He was never one to swear but shit. The beast turned to him, revealing a white masked face. It tilted its head to the side before springing forward, its massive bulk shadowing Shino and Sakura from above. The Aburame widened his eyes, wondering what the hell to do in those brief seconds, before pressing Sakura into his chest and lurching to another roof. The beast still shadowed him, and he wished over and over again that he'd reach sunlight and escape the belly-flop-like attack. He glanced above him, panting, and then looked forward again, just in time to see a gleam of light flash past him. Her chest burned as she pushed her legs to maximum speed. Even then she still couldn't match Niji Hyuga's pace. This normally would have angered her, but there was no time to feel any of the sort, partially because she knew the prodigy kicked butt, hence why he was a prodigy, but more so because the black beast had torn down the west wall not too long ago, and the two of them were on the move. What annoyed Ino the most was they were running towards the beasts. Albeit, she understood why perfectly. In fact, it was her idea. Why? Because there were kids there, where the orphanage was, and the adults working the place only had enough time to save a few. The rest were up to the ninja. There was no point in hiding either, as the invaders had known they were there, having found them 10 minutes ago. She jumped over a corpse impaled by a stake and pushed her legs to go faster. The only warning she got before she was suddenly bulldozed to the side and into a pile of broken wood was Niji looking over his shoulder, his Byakugan activated. Dust rained down around her, and she attempted to hoist herself onto her elbows. The skin on her back stung horribly as she stretched, so she relaxed instantly. The warm sensation of her shirt sticking to her skin made her aware that her back was most likely now adorning an assortment of scratches, thanks to the wood, and blood, again, thanks to the wood. Blinking her blue eyes, she took note of the weight on top of her and then focused her vision on the person hovering over her. The lavender-tinted orbs hinted that it was Niji, as well as the chocolate-brown hair falling from his ponytail and framing his face. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his puffs of air swishing the locks around his chin. Ino stiffly nodded. "There's a hole behind you. Crawl through it." He gestured to the opening with his eyes. "Hurry. We're covered in wood but they'll find us soon." That was all she needed to hear before she sprung into motion. She twisted onto her stomach and slammed against the edges with the palm of her hand. The wood broke away and she slid herself forward. "You're back. We'll fix that later," Niji said from behind. Now that he wasn't lying on top of her, Ino found she was able to breathe properly. The hole was now bigger, and Ino slid through it easily enough with her lithe frame. She tilted her head from side to side as she surveyed the room swiftly. A room, which meant they were in a house. Not good. It could collapse any second. Niji's hand appeared through the opening, and in her panic, Ino grabbed it and pulled, causing him to slide on the wooden floor and hit her legs. He didn't say a word as he stood up. Let's go. They scampered upstairs and quickly found a window. They smashed it. They slipped through just as the house was flattened by a beast. Ino squealed, having the claw of the invader just miss her feet. Niji pulled her to a stand before he zipped off, the blonde female following, although wincing. Now on the roofs, the two moved swiftly, jumping over alleys and, in the meantime, attempting to put as much distance between them and one of the invaders behind. Where's the Hokage when you need her? Ino yelled, even though her lungs and back were on fire. The two jumped down from the roof and onto the main walkway, just as a pair of heeled feet walked forward beside them. Blinking, Ino looked up, seeing the very person she was wishing for. I believe there's your answer, Yamanaka, Niji replied dryly. Ino glared. Tsunade's honey-colored eyes were not on them but rather on the black beast that had quickly noticed her. They moved in. You kids better get out of here before the real danger comes. Niji nodded. Yamanaka. Let's go, he said, gesturing to the path in front of them that was also a turn-off from the main road. She didn't feel like running though. Her legs were screaming no more, as did her lungs and back. She almost decided to reply with a negative as she swallowed but found herself picturing those orphans cowering underneath rubble. Ino narrowed her eyes and nodded, sprinting along behind him as they left the Hokage behind. Besides, she looked pissed. Only idiots would want to be around for that. Shino blinked dubiously as the beast let out a shrilling howl and disappeared into a sudden cloud of dust. He blinked again. That sort of thing of combusting was something that only happened in the silliest children fairy tales, such as The Playful Criminal, but yet he had witnessed it. He watched with caution as the stretch blade by his ear, the smooth side of it almost brushing against his ear, began to retract. He paused, fingers enclosed tightly over Sakura's small shoulder, as he tried to figure out what the hell happened. Light footsteps behind him caused the bugs within him to stir. He peered over his shoulder a little, brown eyes watching sandaled feet move closer to him. His eyes narrowed. Swiftly Shino jumped back, turning his body to face this newcomer who could apparently destroy these beasts so simply. The very thought was disturbing. He scanned over this man who seemed to tower over him. On his face was a very taunting smile, accompanied by the upturned eyes which were framed by short silver hair. This person meant bad business. Shino shifted slightly and Sakura stirred in his arms but did not waken. He was ready to fight if necessary, or at least escape, but... Heya! The Aburaim almost dropped the pinkette at the cheery introduction. This man, he couldn't feel anything from him, anything strong to be precise. He could sense something within him but otherwise, besides the katana at his side and the strange clothes, he could almost pass as a normal citizen. But he was not. He managed to destroy the black beast with a single attack while Konoha Ninja had spent 3 days trying to destroy them with no result. Swallowing, Shino responded. Who are you and what business do you have in Konoha? Konoha, huh? He scratched his cheek, acting thoughtful. So that's the name of this place. Who I am doesn't matter right at the moment, but as for why we're here, he spread his arms and chuckled. Well, look around. We're here to clean up. Tsunade sucked in her stomach as she stepped back to dodge a blow from the side. The black fist narrowly missed, scraping her fluttering clothing before punching the side of a building. It crumbled just like everything else in Konoha. Holding her breath, she jumped onto the arm and sprinted towards the head, retracting a hand and gathering chakra at her knuckles. Eyes narrowing so that her eyes were almost hidden, she cried out as she swung through, her fist making contact with the white mask. It was just common knowledge that this was the place to hit. The clay cracked, a resonating scream following seconds after as the beast grabbed its head. Tsunade flipped off just in time to avoid getting harmed. It squirmed and moved from side to side, squealing. The mask had cracked a little bit but did not break. Hope stirred in her chest as Tsunade left her fingers curled into her palm. Hopefully this beast was at its end. Hopefully. Just hopefully. And just as quickly as this hope spread, it was instantly doused as the invader screamed one last time before changing it to a guttural snarl, tilting its head towards the Hokage. How dare you! She knew they talked. She knew that before, when Ino and Niji had fled. Their taunts, however, while threatening because she was not able to harm them entirely, did not deter her from the imminent fight. Shut up, she hissed, biting her bottom lip. Is this really the end of Konoha? As if Kami heard her question, the beast shrilled once again and Tsunade looked up, shocked. Before she could utter a word, it dissolved into the air, leaving behind an empty street. Startled, the Hokage whirled around, eyes wide. Where did the rest go? She muttered to herself. There were no more in sight. This thought gnawed at her. Was that just the first wave? Did they have a time limit or something? Was there someone else around? Her last question was answered once again when she felt an overwhelming presence behind her. Clenching a fist, she pivoted, thrusting her hand at the figure, only to make contact with the building now in front of her. Honey eyes widened again as the rock crumbled around her hand. Impressive strength. If you were at top condition, I'm certain you would have hit me. Gritting her teeth, Tsunade veered her head to the left, Honey eyes taking in the appearance of this new person. She hadn't seen anything to be certain, but she had a feeling that he had something to do with those beasts. Short brown hair swept over brown eyes peering through black-rimmed glasses. He held himself lightly, as though, when he walked, he floated across the floor. His lips were upturned into a gentle smile, with both curiosity and amusement embedded in it. His body was garbed in robes of white over black, along with sandaled feet. She huffed. A perk of being a ninja was that she quickly learned to never trust first meetings with a complete stranger, much less a stranger that could quite possibly destroy something she could not. Therefore, her depiction of this supposed aristocratic man? Don't trust him. She didn't intend to. Reports from all over Konoha swarmed to her as soon as Tsunade stepped into her office. Wide-eyed with both panic and relief, many ninja tried to explain all at once that the invaders were decreasing drastically and that there were also several sightings of people wearing an attire that was akin to a kimono. She was relieved to know that she wasn't the only one to encounter one of these new strangers, but this relief was overwhelmed with the knowledge that they could harm what ninja could not. She couldn't let it go. It was her duty, as the Hokage of Konoha, to be aware and suspicious of such power. That's enough, she stated loudly, and instantly the ninja before her, crowding, wide-eyed, went silent. Are there any reports of these new invaders actually harming one of our own? Tsunade had a feeling she knew what the answer was as she asked her question, but she wanted to be certain. The man she had met minutes ago did not harm her, merely helped her, but still. The ninja all shook their heads simultaneously and waited in silence for their leader to reply. Tsunade felt the tension in her muscles leave her as she relaxed her shoulders. Konoha was alive still, and that knowledge was more than enough to push her on. Fan out through the village, find every ninja you can, and tell them to search every nook and cranny. There are civilians out there who could be dying, leave the dead. She stormed to her temporary desk, waving off a glass of water as it was presented to her. Everybody followed her with their eyes, listening to her orders. They will get a proper burial after this nightmare has ended. She sat down, lacing her fingers. What are you waiting for? Go! Every ninja the rank of Chunin and above disappeared in a cloud of smoke, leaving the library in a haze. Shizen approached the Hokage, Taunton held in her grip carefully, with a look of some type of relief in her eyes. Lady Tsunade, the civilians trapped in the Hokage mountain. Tsunade rose, gesturing for her assistant to follow. Heading there now. Let's hope they're alive. Her cloak billowed as she sharply turned the corner at the door, disappearing from view. Hush. Hush. It's okay. We're here, Ino soothed the bawling child, her thin fingers trailing over the infant's cheek softly, wiping away the free-falling tears. The crying did not cease, and she felt her heart go out to the orphan, along with 10 others that were now crowding around both her and Niji. He was sitting beside her, at least 4 of the children clinging to him for dear life, their faces stained by dust and tears with fear etched into their eyes and lips. In a comforting manner, Ino had noticed that he held them close to his body, as though he was promising solid refuge. She could see his lips move as he spoke to them, but she could not hear what he was saying. The loud cries of the orphans filled the room instead. Sighing, Ino pressed the baby to her bosom, hugging him and relishing in the maternal feeling that swam in her belly as the child raised its stubby arms and attempted to wrap them around her neck. Instead, he gripped her shirt tightly. Another girl, at least 3 years old, had her arms wrapped around Ino's waist and was lying on the floor, her head buried in the blonde's lap as she bawled her eyes out too. It was almost overwhelming. In fact, it was. How were they supposed to transport 10 orphans back to safety? Then again, the beasts seemed to have no longer pursued them, which was a warming thought until Niji insisted that they'd eventually be found. Ino scoped the small dusty room. The remaining 4 orphans were the oldest and had no doubt been the reason for several of the younger ones' survival. But then the blonde's heart clenched as she counted the heads once more, save for herself and Niji's. Is this it? She asked, her question directed to the eldest kids at the back, at least 8 years old. Are these all the children? One of them, a male with rusty red short hair, nodded curtly, and Ino watched him carefully. His expression, although somewhat calm, held sadness. Were there more beforehand? She stroked the girl's back at her side, her fingers creating a pattern of swirls. She feared the answer. And instantly her chest clenched once more as the boy nodded ruefully. The female beside him, shoulder-length black hair with a smattering of freckles across her cheeks and nose, piped up quickly, placing her hand quickly on the boy's shoulder. A number were still saved by some of the adults, and a few also tried running away by themselves. Ino bowed her head, pressing her lips to the infant's forehead at her chest. Those kids were most likely killed. Others were. The female orphan stopped, her jugular expanding as she swallowed, stubborn about leaving, so they stayed behind. Ino closed her eyes, feeling water collect at her tear ducts and tickle her lashes. Niji and she had passed the main orphanage building not long ago, only to find it demolished with hardly any signs of survival from the orphans. Luckily, Niji had spotted tracks leading away, and after following them, came across this group of 10. At least they had found some that were alive, and Ino was determined to keep it that way. Sniffing, Ino raised her head, giving a gesture of affirmation to the female to let her know she understood before turning to Niji. He spoke for her. Time to go. Can all of you walk? He got a collection of nods and the children rose to a stand. The 4 around Niji remained glued to his side, their hands hooked onto either his pants or his baggy shirt. One was clutching his hair, whom he quickly grabbed and swung onto his shoulders. Let's go. They left quickly, sticking to the back alleys and hiding in the shadows, even though there was a chance of them being seen. Niji felt anxious at the lack of opposition, having used his Byakugan to scope around them only to see nothing life-threatening. Ino followed close behind him quietly, keeping the younger children between the two of them and often casting a glance over her shoulder at the elder ones. The babe was still pressed tightly to her chest, its cloth loosening as she ran. Her heart pounded against her chest, her eyes watching Niji carefully. He stopped suddenly, causing a small pile-up against the back of his legs. Ino's breath escaped her as he quickly dropped the child around his shoulders to the ground and took a step forward, his eyes squinting further into the dust-clouded alley. Niji? The blonde prompted quietly, raising a finger to her pink lips at the 8 years old behind her, then to the younger ones at her waist. The Hyuga leveled a hand to his side at his waist, telling her to not move or make any sudden sounds. He spoke softly. There is something coming. The children clung to both ninja instantly, their faces filled with fear. Ino tried to ignore a few of them, wiping their faces against her skirt. Seconds passed, and barely a few more afterwards a black figure materialized before the group, their face smothered in the shadows of the high stone walls around them. Niji struck instantly. Flattening his hand and shifting into position, he shot his palm forward at the intruder. Ino closed her eyes, looking away and emitting a quiet gasp as Niji attacked in those quick 5 seconds. A sharp twang echoed down the narrow way and she flinched, feeling a dome of air suddenly billow past, tossing and playing with her long hair. Silence. She raised her head, blue eyes scanning the situation. The first thing she took in was blood dripping to the ground, and she realized soon enough that it was seeping from Niji's palm. His hand was pressed against metal, the two attacks quivering with equal strength as they pressed against each other. His feet shifted slightly against the dirt, ready to strike again if needed. I mean no harm. We are here to help. Ino's eye perked up at the deep and somewhat nasally voice, her eyes catching sight of shoulder-length blonde hair and side bang that was cast dimly in the dull light from above. Niji didn't relent. How can we trust you? He hissed, shifting position again. If I were truly an enemy, I would have picked off one of the younger ones at the back. The man gestured to the 8-year-old behind Ino with a toss of his head. Ino instantly gathered those children closer to her, as if to say, I'd like to see you try. The Hyuga pondered, his eyes proving that he was sifting through questions and thoughts. His palm pained him but only mildly. His opponent was clearly skilled with the blade and managed to both defend himself and reduce the amount of harm that could have happened to Niji by blocking with the flat of his blade. The cut on his skin was from briefly touching the sides as the two attacks met. We? Niji pondered. The intruder let up, pulling his katana back from Niji, who had cautiously repeated the same thing. He was still on his guard, however. My name is Izuru Kira and I am the lieutenant of the 3rd Squad. My captain is here also, along with another squad, Squad 5. We are here to assist your village in the current siege of Hollows. His words were followed by a piercing shrill from a young girl who pointed viciously at him and tugged harshly on Ino's skirt, tears trailing down her chubby cheeks. She stamped her feet before screaming again, resorting to punch the Yamanaka heiress' thighs. Ino squatted down, hand on the girl's back while her other arm awkwardly held the infant. Hush. Hush. Akane, quiet, one of the 8-year-olds commanded at the back, crossing his arms and looming over the little girl like a tower. She didn't listen before screaming again, banging the sides of Ino's head. Why aren't no cared? Death is air. She twisted her body around on the spot, her small sundress swinging at her knees from side to side. No, no, Ino attempted to comfort again, ignoring the other eyes on her. She stroked the child's blonde hair softly. Death is not here. You're safe, No! Akane tore herself from Ino's body and pointed accusingly at the Azuru again. He's right there. Mama said he comes in back. The blonde ninja could only assume that the kid meant to say black instead but was unable to complete the word, and the rest of her sentences at that, properly through her tears. Ino narrowed her eyes slightly, casting a weary glance at Niji who remained on his guard. He's not going to hurt you. He is not death. On the contrary, Kira broke in, sliding his blade back into its sheath and stepping into the light. His blue eyes gazed down at the dirty Yamanaka. I am. You. Tsunade thrust a finger into the air, directing it at the familiar brunette aristocratic man. Her lips thinned until they were almost white, and her brows knitted inwards, her fingers curled tightly into her palm. He turned to her, a gentle smile on his face, before he gave a short wave. We meet again. Shizen gaped beside the voluptuous blonde but then frowned like her lady. Tsunade had clearly met this man before. The Hokage stamped a foot down, a miniature crater forming at her soles in a cloud of dust. Don't give me that. She huffed, honey eyes hovering over half the citizens of Konoha who were now out of the Hokage mountain, relishing in fresh air and sunlight. Their content faces shone with smiles and several passed the aristocratic man, bowing their head in thanks before moving on. Your citizens are now safe, the brunette stranger said, approaching Tsunade coolly as though confident she was not a threat. I assume I have you to thank for that. She grunted, knowing the answer anyway. His relaxed posture was irritating her. She was a Sannin for Kami's sake, show a little respect. Then again, you're not from around here, are you? Her question was out before he could answer the previous rhetorical one. Closing his mouth, the seemingly gentle male nodded. What gave me away? Tsunade narrowed her eyes at him. It does not matter. Why are you here? Am I being interrogated? He asked coolly, tilting his curiously to the side. Do you see any bars or chains around here? He chuckled. A sense of humor I see. Don't kiss up to me, Tsunade snapped, crossing her arms. I assure you, I was not. He gave a half bow in admission of guilt nonetheless. My apologies. His attitude didn't soothe her at all, but she relaxed her shoulder anyway, keeping her eyes trained on his tall figure. Who are you? She demanded after a short time, reveling in the short wind that passed by and brought with it a cool sensation. My name is Sosuke Aizen. The Hokage raised a delicate eyebrow, expecting a little more than that. His name, while valuable to an extent, didn't explain much of anything else. Speaking of which, it resembled a certain traitor who had betrayed the village not even a month back. You seem annoyed about my lack of response, he remarked after a moment's silence. She saw his brown eyes look over his shoulder and regard Shizen. Tsunade visibly released tension in her muscles completely, figuring that hostility would get her nowhere. I am the Hokage of Konoha, this village. That is all you need to know. He nodded in affirmation. I'd appreciate it if I got some much-needed answers now. You seem to have them. Yes. His eerie gentle smile slid onto his face again. There is much to explain. What's your name? Why are you dressed like that? Where are you from? That was so cool. Show me how you did that. Where'd you learn it from? Huh. Yash. That was exceptionally youthful. The female stranger paused, chestnut-colored eyes blinking at the two hyperactive boys before her, their orbs still shining with delight at the feat she had performed 10 minutes ago. They hadn't given her the opportunity to speak at all, preferring to hear their own voices praise her instead, but now it seemed like they were done, and were waiting expectantly for her to answer them. She giggled, finally extending a hand to Lee with an amused smile. He took it. I'm Momo Hinamori. It's a pleasure to meet you. She shook Naruto's hand and then bowed respectfully to the both of them. The blonde looked taken aback by her actions. I'm Rock Lee. Naruto scratched his hair, making it wilder than before. A Naruto Uzumaki. He was surprised that she didn't cringe from him like so many villagers from Konoha had done for the past 13 years. It was a relief to know that he wasn't viewed as a monster to some people after all. He gave her a cheeky but awkward grin. That was so cool. Can you show us again? Momo shook her head. I really shouldn't. I have a job to do at the moment. I'll see you later perhaps. She turned, waving a hand over her shoulder as she walked away. I'll buy you ramen sometime. Naruto shouted back as Lee swung his arm from side to side in the air like it was on fire. Farewell. Her giggle echoed down the street for a few seconds after she had vanished, leaving the two boys alone in silence. After a bit, Naruto looked to Lee and beamed. She's so cool. Yash. So youthful. 10-10. The weapons mistress pivoted, wincing and pressing a hand gingerly to her side, and seeing Niji and Ino come running towards her tailed by several children who were red in the face with exertion and were puffing loudly, even when they stopped at the entrance of the makeshift hospital. She tried to force her lips into a smile as she leaned inconspicuously against the wall. The beads of sweat rolling down the sides of her head, however, gave her away. Niji. Ino. She greeted, fake smiling. How were things with you? The Hyuga lifted a young girl from his shoulders and placed her carefully onto the ground. She ran instantly to the group of orphans behind him who were now being attended by some medic nin. Ino, beside him, reluctantly relinquished her hold on the baby to another medic, whispering some things under her breath to the healing ninja. With a weary sigh, she turned back to the two brunettes, wiping her brow. Difficult at the start, but then the intruders seemed to vanish, Niji answered, patting at his shirt to rid it of visible dust. Couldn't save all the orphans, Ino added timidly after him. 10-10 winced again, crossing her arms gingerly. She switched her weight from her right leg to her left, and looked away from Tenten's curious gaze. We could only find those 10. She gestured to the children in the corner. Tenten nodded in understanding, before arching an eyebrow. She tried to ignore Niji's eyes that were now scanning over her body, sensing that something was indeed wrong. She swallowed. The intruders vanished? Niji grunted. We found out why soon afterwards. Turns out some sort of extermination squad, or squads, were released from someplace. Her expression morphed to genuine confusion. These squads have the ability to destroy the black intruders. She raised her eyebrows almost to her hairline, her jaw dropping slightly. You're kidding? But that's not right. We've tried everything to defeat them and could hardly do anything. What? How, huh? Ino swayed, her lips barely parting as she spoke. They're not ninja, apparently. It was only then did Tenten realize that the Yamanaka's face was unusually pale. Swallowing, she asked, did they hurt you? What happened? The blonde shrugged before shaking her head. We only met one, but he said that there were more. What happened? You didn't answer that. I don't think that she's the one who has to give more answers, Tenten, Niji cut in sharply, his eyes narrowing. The brunette swallowed again, her fingers unconsciously clenching over her side, and in retaliation, she winced. Damn it! Ino gave her a serious look, followed by one of slight anger when she noticed what Niji was hinting at. Her anger changed to concern as she stepped up to the weapons mistress and attempted to check the wound. Tenten winced as her shirt was lifted. She tried not to look her teammate in the eyes. His jaw was tight as he stared at her. What happened? The Yamanaka whispered, blue eyes running over the white but now blood-soaked bandages that covered her entire stomach. Tenten closed her eyes, pushing Ino's prying hands away from her body as she gritted out, I'm fine. Ino scoffed. Don't knock me off. Answer her, Niji added. The brunette female fought the urge to sigh as she pressed a hand gingerly to the wound again, only for it to be slapped away by the concerned blonde beside her. It's not as bad as it looks. The two raised an eyebrow. I'm serious. I just got scratched. Ino snorted this time. Just got scratched my ass, that's a mean one, she said as she jabbed a finger at the wound. She attempted to take another look but her hands were slapped away instead. I'm fine, Tenten gritted out. Will probably be forced to keep off my feet for a few. On the chair now, the blonde snapped, pointing at the small stool that was right behind the blade expert. Tenten groaned loudly but gave in, lowering herself slowly. Anyway, training will be suspended for a while. And before you ask, I got this wound by saving those two. She gestured dispiritedly at the two unconscious kids lying on their own rickety beds nearby, a medic nin waiting at their motionless bodies to keep a constant check for vital signs. Almost got here about an hour ago. I had heard that there was a makeshift hospital nearer to the Hokage Tower, but then those intruders arrived and knocked them out, managing to slice me up too. She bowed her head, her forehead resting in her palms as she fought back tears of failure. They're both in critical condition. Ino pressed a comforting hand on Tenten's shoulder, half expecting the tomboy to shrug her off, but she didn't. The blonde let out a sigh of relief. There was a moment of silence, wherein which the weapons mistress attempted to regain control of her emotions. There is another Yamanaka, Niji said after a bit, pointing to a tall brunette man standing in the middle of the crowded street full of exhausted civilians and ninja. Kira, the man they had encountered before, approached him and gave a small bow. This proved that the other male was a superior. Ino narrowed her blue eyes, peering around the corner of the wall, before looking away sharply. What the hell is going on? She hissed more to herself than to anyone else. Her fingers unconsciously tightened around Tenten's shoulder. There's the Hokage, Tenten added too, her face drawn with disappointment. Sure enough, the blonde woman appeared beside the supposed superior. Her posture seemed to hint that she was keeping her eye on him and his cohorts. He didn't react to her presence. At that moment, a third kimono-garbed man appeared beside Kira. His lips moved quickly before he gestured behind himself. Niji, Ino and Tenten looked a little further down the road and caught sight of half of Team 8 heading in their direction with an unconscious Sakura draped limply over Kiba's shoulder. Said boy raised a hand in greeting. Yo guys! Ino and Tenten waved a hello, the latter's kind of weakly, while Niji just gave a curt nod. Medic Nin crowded to them the instant they stepped into the hospital, and Shino and Sakura were whisked away before a single word could be uttered, leaving behind a blinking Inuzuka and a panting Akamaru. He shrugged, rubbing his hands together and giving his companion a stroke on the head. What happened to you guys? He asked, joining the group. Tenten noticed his eyes drawn to her waist. You're bleeding. He pointed brusquely at the wound, and the weapon's mistress glared at him, pressing a hand to her side only to cringe when she felt the stickiness of her shirt. Ah, she huffed. She reached for the end of her top and proceeded to pull it over her head when Ino stopped her short and dragged her, gently, to a medic Nin to replace the bandages. Ino ended up getting her back fixed up quickly as well. She had left Niji and Kiba in an awkward silence. Moments later, the two returned, a grimace on both their lips. Stuff, Ino replied dryly as soon as they parked themselves down where they were before. Kiba blinked at her attitude but didn't say a word. He cast the more wounded female a curious expression, which she didn't see. Do you know his name? Niji asked, gesturing to the silverhead who was still smiling widely. At that moment, a fourth stranger appeared. She was small and innocent looking. Kiba growled under his breath, earning him a few confused expressions and a raised eyebrow. Jinikimaru. He saved Shino's bacon, Sakura's as well. What happened? Ino asked softly. She cast her eyes over the Pinkette's sleeping form on a mattress nearby. Stuff, was Kiba's mocking reply. Ino glared at him, and Tenten giggled despite her aching muscles. Help! Need immediate assistance! A desperate cry flooded the street. Civilians and ninja alike turned to the source, seeing a Chunin come sprinting to the hospital, carrying a limp and frail body in his arms. The four genin froze as soon as they caught sight of the short, blood-stained, navy hair and pale, feminine hands. It was Hinata. Niji went slightly pale as her lifeless body was carried shakily in and instantly stolen by a medic Nin. Figures zoomed everywhere as they brought the heiress to a table and instantly began shredding pieces of her clothing off and locating the wounds amongst the dark blood that stained her pale body. Ino had gasped, hands to her mouth as she watched wide-eyed, her face turning a shade of white just like the male Hyuga beside her. Her body shook like a leaf, but it was nothing compared to Kiba's absolute rage. His fists were clenched into tight balls and he gritted his teeth so hard that they began to hurt. Blood seeped from between his nails and he watched with desperation as the Nin began to heal his frail teammate. The medic's chatter and screams for assistance made the four of them go deaf before all the words gradually became a blur, and nothing was distinguishable. A Nin ran past them, knocking Kiba's shoulder as she ran to the street and cried for Tsunade's help, blood dripping to the ground as hysteria reached her voice. The Hokage entered swiftly, nudging Kiba once more, to whom she glanced at. She nodded to Shizen, who instantly ushered the three out of the hospital. Tenten was forced to stay, but she really did not want to. Clenching and unclenching his fist, Kiba suddenly kicked a bucket nearby. At the same time, Niji snapped, gripping the Inuzuka by the shoulders tightly and narrowing his lavender eyes to a deadly glare. Stop, he hissed, teeth bared as he pushed the canine lover away from him. Ino, beside him, burst into tears. She didn't know Hinata like the back of her hand, but the shy female was in her class and academy, and the two had often seen each other on the streets, and even had the odd outing. She was a friend. A fragile friend. And it froze the blonde to the core as her mind began screaming at her to accept that it was the life of a ninja. She knew it. She always knew it, but it was hard to face the reality of it. A figure blurred past her, only to halt so suddenly that the ninja almost fell face first into the tossed-up dirt. He faced Ino with an alarmed face, which only shook her to the core even more. Yamanaka! We've just received reports from the west. The Nara residence is completely destroyed. Impossible. Only just a few minutes ago Niji and her had arrived to safety and met with a wounded but otherwise fine Tenten. And now, in a matter of half an hour, 2 of her friends were facing death. How many more were wounded out there? How many of the senseis were fighting? Breathing? Her heart leaped to the throat as those words left the Chunin's lips, and she fought desperately against the urge to just faint, to just fall asleep and wake up for the finale. If only she could, but her loyalty kept her standing. Her head was light but heavy with fear, and in a flash of purple and yellow, she disappeared from the walkway. Niji shifted to Kiba as soon as the 2 left, and through grinding teeth, whispered hoarsely to the Inuzuka heir, "Stay here for Hinata." "You know I will," he barked back, not flinching under the Hyuga's piercing glare before the branch member squatted and propelled up, following behind Ino. Adrenaline left Kiba's body in a rush and exhaustion hit. He collapsed to his knees, the cries from within the makeshift hospital screaming and echoing in his mind. My. Losing a lot of loved ones?" A mocking voice sounded above him. Kiba growled menacingly, swiping viciously behind him only to hit nothing but air. His chest heaving, he glared at the silverhead grinning at him, his head blocking out the sunlight that would otherwise shine in the Inuzuka's face. His nails grew pointed and his canines sharpened as he screamed, "It's your fault." Ikemaru's lips stretched even more if it were possible. "Mine? I failed to see how." Akamaru barked as though to answer the man's question. "It's your fault," he jabbed a clawed finger at the cat-like male, "because you and your pathetic friends seem to know everything about these things attacking us." Saliva spat everywhere, and his face was turning a deep red from both anger and lack of air. "If you had come sooner, then none of this would have happened." What's pathetic is a ninja, one who seems to specialize in dog training. After all, dogs are known for loyalty, is relying on a group of people they don't even know and is actually admitting the difference in strength. Kiba snarled, leaping for the silverhead, attempting to claw his chest open. Several things happened at once. The blonde stranger whisked into view, his blade drawn and his legs spread into a prepared position. At the same time, a familiar smell hit Kiba's nose seconds before his mother appeared before him, snatching his arm out of distance from a strike of defense from the man. Some pulled him back as his chest heaved heavily with exertion, his eyes narrowed solely on the grinning Ikemaru standing behind the other. Pain shot through his wrist like lightning and his parent shoved her face into his, spit spraying across his nose and cheeks as she yelled. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Think before completing such rash actions, boy. Otherwise you will get killed." "But he..." "I don't care. Don't let your temper get the better of you. Why don't you learn the same thing?" A dull ringing echoed in his ears as he was punched on his cheek, causing him to spring across the ground and skid to the ground. Akamaru whined and attempted to retreat, only for Kuramaru to block him and growl threateningly. Stars flitted in front of his Kiba's eyes and he shakily lifted himself above the ground, coughing and hacking as he spat blood to the soil. "I'm trying to stop you from making the same mistakes I did," some shouted. "Now enough of this. Either stay and keep your mouth shut or go help with the Nara compound." Kiba rubbed his cheek, his teeth aching badly, and he felt more blood begin to pool around his tongue. He spat it out again. Niji entered his mind. "Stay here for Hinata." And then his teammate's bloody body flitted through. He sighed grudgingly, his chest burning to destroy something to release his vented anger, but he didn't. He calmly, as much as possible, sat down, digging his nails into the tilled earth. Akamaru gave a cautious whine as he stole his way to his master and sat down beside him. Sim nodded in satisfaction, Kuramaru grunting beside her. Ikemaru just grinned. Not long after, Shizen herded the 4 black-garbed strangers to the tower. Kiba scowled as they walked past. "Shikamaru! Shikamaru!" Ino screamed, tears of fear streaming down her small cheeks as she sprinted across the east wing of the manor, her shoes pounding on the broken tiles of the roof. "Shikamaru!" Her voice cracked. She sprinted around more, cursing her legs for not carrying her faster even though she was exhausted. "Shikamaru! Please!" Breast contracting, she took in a sudden heavy breath, her esophagus straining to take in the air due to the tightness in her chest. The sensation was coarse, making her cough to clear her throat of saliva. "Please! Come out!" More tears leaked from her eyes. "Shikamaru! Yamanaka!" Ino whipped around, hair flipping across her face and sticking to the wet trails over her cheeks. Hope fluttered in her chest like a horde of butterflies were set loose and were fighting to fly higher. Knees trembling, she took a step towards the helping Chunin, eyes wide as fear soon enveloped her insides. Did she truly want to see what it was? What if it was Shikamaru and he was wounded? Or worse, dead? She took a hasty step back, shaking her head. "Yamanaka!" The Chunin called out again, waving her down. A few other ninja around approached him, beginning to heave debris off of something. She shook her head again, her brain pounding as negatives pulsed in her mind. No, she whispered. What if? She watched, frozen, as the ninja tossed more wood and metal to the side, eventually exposing something that she could not entirely see from her spot. They crouched low, their hands touching whatever it was they had uncovered. And then she felt her heart restart when one shouted in a clear, but desperate voice, "He's alive! Get him to the hospital!" Several nin proceeded to lift the body cautiously off the ground, and she caught sight of spiky brown hair and a limp arm as the ninja carrying him turned. Ino practically flew to him, relieved that it was Shikamaru. Her mind refused to believe it was anybody else, but suddenly skidded to a halt when another mournfully said, "This one's not." The air lodged in her throat. The council room door opened and Tsunade entered, her body visibly tired from the previous session at the hospital. She wiped at her brow with the back of her hand before rounding to her seat, giving a nod to both Hamiura and Koharu along the way, who scowled at her lateness. The blonde slouched in her chair for a few seconds, taking in a few breaths, before she straightened. The elderly lady beside her stiffened her jaw and wrinkled her nose. "We are the Hidden Leaf Council, and we'd like to hear your reasons and role for invading our village," Koharu started after a moment's silence, her voice flooding the entire room consisting of the rest of the council with the Hokage and her assistant at the head. She tilted her head at the four people in front of her in question. "Invade?" Ikemaru repeated. His grin seemed to widen at the thought. "You're branding us before an explanation. Innocent until proven guilty, remember." It was said as a statement rather than a question. "Guilt is written all over your face." He shrugged. "There you go again." "Captain Ikemaru," Aizen warned, casting a glance in the Silverhead's direction before bowing in apology to Koharu. "My apologies." The female member grunted, as though only half satisfied by the respect this other man showed. She set her eyes on Ikemaru before directing her vision back to Aizen. "If you would allow me to explain?" He received a nod from the elderly lady. "Good. Now, perhaps it would be better if you asked more detailed questions." "Of course," Koharu agreed. Tsunade leaned back in her chair, acting like she didn't have any intention of joining in on the interrogation. "We have tried many ways to destroy these intruders." "Hollows," Ikemaru almost sang. Koharu glared at him with lidded eyes before continuing on. "These hollows, but none of our tactics have worked. However, yours do. Explain." "I believe the basic knowledge of hollows is required first of all," Ikemaru interrupted again, his smile widening as Koharu went taut in her seat. Hamiura, on the other side, narrowed his eyes. "But if you really want the answer, it's all because we're Shinigami and you're not." "Shinigami? What the? It's not possible. They don't exist." "He's lying." Council members burst into discussion, sending glares of suspicion down at the Shinigami. Hamiura and Koharu seemed to go white at the thought, and, if it were possible, seemed to leer even more. Tsunade leaned forward in her seat, lacing her fingers and placing her elbows on the desk as she analyzed the four. "Death gods," she muttered. "Silence!" One of the members yelled, and instantly the room went as still as the grave. Ikemaru's smile widened even more at the hysteria he had caused just by stating the truth. "A Shinigami is trained specifically to destroy hollows like the ones who attacked your village, along with other tasks, such as allowing passage for souls to pass on," Aizen explained patiently. Momo smiled behind him. "Souls?" Tsunade queried. "The dead," Ikemaru answered bluntly. The Hokage switched her sight from Aizen to the Silverhead beside him for a second. "There are many questions we have yet to ask," stated Hamiura. He straightened in his seat and crossed his arms on the desk, leaning forward in interest. Aizen nodded. "Then ask?" "We have never heard of hollows attacking anybody until 3 days ago, when they suddenly appeared out of nowhere," Koharu explained, her wrinkly lips thinning. The council members situated around the room gave a nod of agreement. "None of us here know the full details of why and how it happened, but—" "None of you here?" a member snapped, rising partly out of his seat. Kira and Momo glanced at each other, then to the ninja who rose, their fingers twitching, ready to grasp their blade if needed. "How many of you are there?" Aizen shifted to face the council member, his patient smile residing on his face once more. "There are many. We, squads 3 and 5, were sent to exterminate the hollows that currently threatened your village." "You speak as though more will come," Koharu noted. Ikemaru chuckled. "There'll be a lot more." She seemed to whiten considerably at the thought. "To answer your initial question," Aizen interrupted before some sort of argument broke loose, This is the first time a Shinigami has ever set foot in your world. Our world? Tsunade prodded, leaning even further over her desk. We have never encountered human beings that are like you. Your fighting style is different from our own. And it will not be disclosed, Koharu stated firmly. Aizen raised an eyebrow. I was not asking. How is this the first time? Tsunade encouraged, her tone hinting that she longed for this interrogation to end, even though it was quite interesting so far. I believe the word our scientists used was tear. Somehow the barrier hiding your world from the rest was suddenly torn open, giving both Shinigami and Hollows access. The only thing is the tear is larger in Huenco, which is a plane between Soul Society, where Shinigami and souls reside, and the human world. Because the tear is larger, more hollows can seep through. And yet you are here? Hamura grunted. It took time for the tear to be located in Soul Society, and once it was found, Captain Yamamoto sent us, the captains and lieutenants of squads 3 and 5. So more will come? A member asked. Ikemaru crossed his arms. Did no one hear me say it before? Numerous council members twitched at his tone and voice, particularly his brash use of words. Yes, Aizen nodded. More will come and Captain Yamamoto will continue to send Shinigami to keep this world safe. Would it not be easier for you to train some of our own in your ways? Koharu suggested. The room went silent. It felt like an icy breeze surged through without anyone even taking notice of it. Aizen's expression didn't falter for a second, but the notion clearly seemed like taboo of a sort. This confused Tsunade, as it was a rather rational question, but then again, not everyone is willing to expose their techniques and secrets to just anybody, themselves included. Regrettably, the idea would give us the opportunity to focus more Shinigami on other areas than to keep an eye out for you, but, Aizen began, only to be interrupted like several times before. His fingers twitched. Regrettably? Hamura snapped deeply, his voice bellowing into the room. An eye out? You talk as though we are mere children and nothing more than a nuisance. Aizen opened his mouth to respond but wasn't able to get out a word before a council member cut in. It seems to me as though they don't want to share their knowledge. And did we? Tsunade accused, narrowing her eyes at the member who had spoken. Her fingers tightened considerably over the back of her hands before she slammed her palms down. They have every right not to, just like we do. Perhaps if your mind was not swelling with desire for more power, then a deal could be made with fair prices on both sides. Lady Hokage, please retake your seat, Koharu snapped, glaring at the blonde Sannin as said woman slowly lowered back down. Tsunade gritted her teeth, then began grinding them, glaring at the elderly lady to the side of her. She released a tense breath before redirecting her attention to the Shinigami. Continue what you were saying. Perhaps this matter could be discussed and debated with more suited Shinigami, Aizen suggested, his posture now a little more tense than his usual laid-back one that Tsunade had seen before. Explain. Ikemaru chuckled, though there was no real humor in it. The prospect will be discussed with the 13 captains of the court guard squads. The fact that he spoke with pride wasn't lost within the members, but they didn't question upon it, already understanding that these captains held much influence in decisions. How will we be able to debate our point of view if you are in the Soul Society? Koharu asked. Don't worry. We'll return. He waved at her, ignoring, and possibly reveling, in her put-out expression of such a gesture. Hamura stood. How can we be sure? Tsunade glared in his direction. We can't if there is no trust. If we want this alliance to work, we'll have to trust that they'll return. She eyed the Shinigami by the end of her sentence, and Aizen seemed to give her a slight nod of agreement. You are a good leader, he stated calmly. Tsunade fought the urge to say something back but luckily didn't. Today just wasn't her day to begin with. If that will be all? Ikemaru gave a short bow, mockingly of course. Not quite. Koharu stood this time. It may be prudent for you to leave someone behind to explain to us in full detail of Shinigami and your history. He frowned, his smile slightly receding due to the demand. Why? If we are to be allies, a good bridge would be to extend some basic knowledge to one another. He put his hands on his hips, amused though distantly, very distantly, irritated. And who would you have in exchange? Captain Ikemaru, perhaps this swap should not proceed until... Kira was suddenly cut off. It's not the information they're overly worried about at the moment, Lieutenant, Aizen said, his brown eyes scanning carefully over Tsunade, Koharu and Hamura. While our information would interest them, the main reason for this exchange would be to hold one of our own as hostage in case we do not return. The chill breeze returned as he neared the end of his sentence, and went as cold as ice as soon as he finished. Within seconds, Konoha members shot to their feet and began shouting outrages at the Shinigami, their fists shaking at them violently as though they were voting for an obvious life and death situation. Aizen's smile seemed to widen a smidgen. Tsunade narrowed her eyes, catching sight of it. The room was filled with screams that echoed back twice as loud until nobody could really discern what the scramble of noise really meant. And it didn't even have an effect on the Shinigami, particularly the two captains at the front. Enough! Tsunade shouted, but silence was not given to her at once. Shut up! Members gradually quietened their vocals, glaring at both the Hokage and the Shinigami. After several minutes of waiting in the stillness, just daring anybody to utter a word, she snapped her honey eyes to Aizen, who seemed to be the allocated leader. The discussion of Shinigami training ninja will occur here, in Konoha, as I'm sure you do not want this lot in Soul Society. Ikimara chuckled, and she further ignored the glares being sent her way. Is this decision sufficient? Aizen nodded after a moment. What of the exchange? Koharu asked, anger embedded in her vocals as she spoke. Her voice shook under the strain of keeping control. That can wait till an agreement is made on both sides, Tsunade explained. The tone in her voice hinted that the topic was now closed. I assume that you will continue to lend assistance while you are gone? Her question was directed to the Shinigami. The room was eerily quiet now that it was not flooded with shattering noise. All hollows around Konoha and the tear have been eliminated. Some Shinigami will be posted beside the tear, in your world, to ensure that if any more hollows go through they will not reach your village, Aizen said. Tsunade bobbed her head sternly. Good. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go check up on a few patients. She pivoted sharply. Shizen. Her assistant nodded, moving aside to allow the big-breasted blonde pass before following behind. Tsunade ignored the looks of anger, disappointment, and disagreement being thrown at her from all sides. Seriously, there were more important things to do than sever a tie with a formidable ally. The fools, she thought, her heels clicking on the stone as she exited the room, Shizen in her wake. They'll be the death of me. It was getting hard to breathe. So hard. She stretched out her fingers on both sides, hoping to reach for something that would pull her back, tug her out of the crushing water that was enveloping her, but she felt nothing but soft sheets under her fingertips. Heart pounding, she clenched her hand, catching some of the material in her palm as she suddenly gasped and sucked in air. Why? Why was it suddenly so hard to breathe? Why couldn't she take in the air? Panic fueled her, and she snapped her eyes open, seeing a white ceiling before blackness as she tried to take in more air. Her fingers clenched even more tightly around the sheets and pain bloomed across her chest and stomach. She attempted to open her mouth and scream, but nothing came out and nothing came in when she went to breathe in. She was gasping, coughing for so much needed breath. Foreign hands began running over her wrists and ankles, holding her down to her bed. She didn't like it. She wanted to be free, wanted to walk towards the light that shone in the distance of the blackness she was seeing. It was so beautiful. Her head was throbbing and her vision occasionally sparkling, almost like stars on black velvet. She collapsed into her cot, feeling herself deflate entirely. The urge to move and breathe was too difficult, too tiring. The hands attempted to do something else, but she couldn't concentrate. Their touch was fading slowly into nothing but a vague numbness. Letting out the very last remnant of air, she opened her eyes briefly, seeing a bright light flash viciously and tormentingly across her vision. Looking past the light, she managed to see blonde bangs dangling over her before the dark consumed her. She closed her eyes slowly, feeling her heartbeat thump loudly in her ears before the beating drum began to slow. Its pace was sad, as though it too was too tired to move on like she. It slowed, the silence between each thump sounding like paradise, as she reached her fingers out to the light before her. The warmth on her fingertips made her smile, and she stepped through, the last beat the final one she'd ever hear. Tears. Wherever he looked, from right to left, that was all he could see. He hadn't realized that the invasion had caused so many casualties and that a few of them he had actually known to an extent. He wanted to close his eyes and never have to see the crying dirty faces of so many citizens of Konoha, but their piercing screams of internal pain made him regret ever choosing to be a ninja. He had chosen the profession to prove himself, but to also stop fighting. Well, he failed. Naruto mournfully sighed and placed his hand on the door handle, watching a young girl scream and hit her mother down the hall. His hand was frozen at the scene, but he forced himself to push the handle down and swing it open. His heart clenched even harder than before when he saw the pink hair splayed over the white satin sheets. Sakura. She was still asleep, it looked like. Naruto had been told what her condition was though, and had been relieved, An understatement, of course, considering he was ready to tear down all the buildings around him if he heard she was critically injured, to learn that she just collapsed under exhaustion. He didn't doubt that Ino would taunt the pinkhead about the fact that she had to be removed from the field just because she was tired, but considering the state that Ino was in. Naruto sat down at Sakura's bed, resting his arms on the side. Ino and Chuji hadn't left Shikamaru's bedside since he had been carried in 12 hours ago. His father was found dead on top of him, shielding himself from the brunt of an attack. He was surprised to see that it was Niji comforting the blonde when they arrived, but he had quickly detached himself from her and left to visit Tenten and Hinata. It was horrible. He didn't know most of what happened, only paying attention to the danger that surrounded him near the west of Konoha, so he was a little confused about why those strangers left. He tried waving to Momo, but she didn't seem to have seen him. Asking Tsunade was fruitless, as she refused to answer any questions, stating that everything will be explained later on. He hoped it would. A crash and a scream outside startled him out of his reverie. Curiosity overwhelmed him when the noises continued, and he walked to the door, opening it a bit to peek his head out. "What do you mean?" Kiba screamed, trying to pull the nurse's arms off his shoulders as he stood right before Tsunade. His face was red and Naruto could see his veins around his neck beginning to bulge. "What do you mean?" A sob tore from his throat halfway through his sentence, and the anger behind it began to dissolve. "What do you?" The Inuzuka took in a sharp breath, his face contorted into fear and sadness as he doubled over, his hands clutching the nurse's forearms so tightly that they were wincing. A racking sob ripped from Kiba's lips once more, and he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his red face. With only a half-hearted growl, he tore himself from the nurse's grip and buried his face into his hands, letting out another howl that echoed down the corridor and chilled Naruto to the bone. He was confused. Why was Kiba so distraught? So upset? He blinked his blue eyes, catching sight of Akamaru whimpering, and yowling quietly as well, under a chair nearby his master. What happened?" Naruto asked softly, his voice a little sketchy. No one answered him. He stepped out, approaching the scene. "What happened, Granny Tsunade?" "Get lost!" Kiba shouted instead. His nails began digging into his forehead so that he was drawing blood. Naruto frowned. What the heck was that for? He recoiled back in surprise when the normally prideful Inuzuka lifted his head fiercely, his canine-like eyes almost ablaze with anger. "What?" he whispered. "Don't butt in, you idiot!" It was clear that he couldn't find strong enough words to show his frustration as he spat out the last of his sentence. "You don't know anything." Courage slipped into the blonde as he spoke up. "I will if you tell me." "Why should I?" Kiba snarled. "All you care about is your precious Sakura. She's all you have eyes for. She's the only one you ever visited in this hospital." Spit was flying everywhere as the canine lover vented loudly. The emotion in his words brought people to tears and seemed to crush Naruto's heart. "What do you mean? Maybe I can." "Cammy. And you're meant to be a fucking ninja? He was breathing heavily, you can't bring back the dead, Naruto." Ice-cold water seemed to crush Naruto at Kiba's words. But even though he was so cold, his skin felt hot and sweaty. It was strange, and all it did was cloud his mind. He couldn't think. He couldn't breathe. All he could do was stare at the Inuzuka's pained face as he stormed past him, nudging his shoulder roughly. "Who died?" "You have no discreetness, Naruto," Tsunade cut in. The blonde looked up at the Hokage, his blue eyes wide with confusion. His lips were parched, and he hurriedly licked them before opening his mouth to ask what it was all about, but she interrupted him. "Look for yourself." He blinked, and she gestured to the room down the end of the corridor, where Shizen was standing, her clipboard pressed against her chest tightly. Her lips were in a grim line and her brow was furrowed. Swallowing, Naruto walked to the door, glancing at Shizen as he stepped into the room. There, bending over the white-sheeted cot, was Kurenai of Team 8. She was crying, her head buried into the stomach of the recently deceased. Her sobs were quiet, muffled by the satin fabric she was resting on. "Naruto," said boy jumped a half a mile at the new voice, his jaw permanently lowered it seemed. It was Shino, and if he looked close enough, Naruto could see some clear tear streaks running down the Aburame's cheeks. The normally indifferent boy directed his eyes elsewhere quickly. But that meant, Naruto snapped his head back to the bed, scanning over the small feet at the foot of the cot and then the pale, small hands that were poking out beneath Kurenai's chest. Hinata. The sky. It wasn't dark and gloomy but rather the very opposite. The sun shone down onto the headstones, the grass surrounding the stone gently swaying in the light breeze that swept over the graveyard. It wasn't at all like the last time death surrounded them. The day the Hokage passed away. Instead, it was peaceful, just what you'd expect from a place that was meant for the peace and quiet, that was meant for the departure of souls and the ending of lives. But to some, lives were very short. Chocolate brown hair danced in the wind, curling and tracing over Niji's broad shoulders. He wasn't deterred. His gaze remained fixated on the headstone before him, a bouquet of fresh purple flowers held limply in his slender fingertips, as though he had just forgotten why he was there in the first place. His lips were parted, like he had something to say but nothing had sprung to mind. But there was. There was so much he wanted to say to Hinata Hyuga, his cousin. But he was lost at words nonetheless. He felt ridiculous. Sure, he hadn't known Hinata that well before the Chunin exams, having hated the main family for at least a quarter of his life, but ever since that day, the day that the Hokage was killed, Niji felt something for her. He felt respect that was previously diminished, respect that sparked to life after he had opened his eyes. Truly opened his eyes. Hinata. A death by the unknown did not suit her. Her broken, bloody body was something Niji had tried to banish from his mind for hours, for 4 days. But every time he thought that he'd kicked out the image from his pristine, white mind, darkness and blood swirled in, and he ended up in frustration. Sparring somehow didn't release enough of his anger, and he was beginning to feel strangely apologetic for a lot of things, such as beating up Lee accidentally. It was horrible. He prided himself on self-control, but her death seemed to have stripped him of that quality, and, in the same way, made him a little more human. It was like she was still around, channeling her personality traits into him. For example, her apologetic nature. For some bizarre reason, Niji found himself saying sorry for a number of things, such as forgetting to bow to Lord Hayashi, or forgetting to knock before entering a room. It was hard to believe that her death had such a big impact on him. It pissed him off too. Sighing, his fingers tightening around the bunched stems of the flowers in his hand, he bent and placed them across the stone, the petals somehow underlining her name to make it stand out, make it seem soft. Because she was, her name, her body, her movement, everything about her was soft. His fingers lightly traced over the stems as his eyes flickered to her headstone again. He ignored the incessant tickling of his long hair against the nape of his neck and arms as he rested his arm on his knee and bowed his head. Say something. I'm sorry. Niji lifted his head quickly, lavender-tinted eyes staring into miserable brown ones. He was so used to seeing Shikamaru with sarcastic, lidded expressions, that seeing one full of sadness made him slightly uneasy. Only a little though. Shikamaru's bound hair swayed in the wind too, the sun coming down from behind him, casting a shadow across Niji. He gestured to the purple flowers that the other had rested upon Hinata's grave. Purple hyacinth. The Hyuga raised an eyebrow. They mean sorry. They do? Niji rose, examining the bouquet of purple upon the gray marbled slab. Yamanaka. Don't blame her, Shikamaru stated, his hands in his pockets. His lips were thin and white. I wasn't. Just how'd she know that I? He let his question hang. A silence passed over the two, the sun beating down on them softly. It was warming, enlightening. The leaves on the trees rustled in the wind, their sound carrying across the graveyard smoothly and calmingly like a fish going with the current of a flowing stream. It was peaceful, relaxing, hearing nothing. It felt like their loved ones were still there, watching them think, watching them move. She's good that way. She knows what other people are thinking, Shikamaru replied softly, his voice being tossed around in the breeze, without them even realizing. Niji's lips lifted, a half-smile forming. I'll have to thank her. He lifted his head to meet the Nara's gaze. She knew just what I wanted to say. The silence crooned over them once more, but they didn't mind. Unfortunately, all too soon, that stillness was shattered by a new arrival. Their footsteps were light but sounded incredibly heavy with the serene mood set. At once Niji and Shikamaru stared at the opening in the trees, seeing a figure melt out of the dull shadows of the shade. And at the same time, both of them felt a surge of anger bubble within them. They clenched their hands and tightened their muscles, their eyes hardening on the man garbed in black robes with a white sleeveless cloak over the top, the ends of the material fluttering in the wind like butterfly wings. His hair, black and long, danced in the breeze too, as he moved against the flow. It was almost like he was gliding across the surface. His hands were, respectively, by his sides. They didn't know him, only that he was sided with those people they had seen before, and somehow, both Niji and Shikamaru felt that it was a sensible reason to feel anger towards him because of it. Just because someone had to be blamed. Neither of them moved, merely watched the man advance on them, his cold eyes almost staring into their souls it seemed. Eventually he halted a couple of meters apart from them. "You have come to pay your respect," he stated more than questioned. Niji lifted his jaw, noting the tone the way the man spoke. He was a noble. In response to this new knowledge, the Hyuga relaxed a little. "Yes," Shikamaru replied stiffly, his eyes, that once portrayed sorrow and remnants of tears, now hard and narrowed like steel. The man reached for the woven fabric handle by his side and the two ninjas stiffened, spreading their feet slightly. He didn't stop. He grasped his blade and unsheathed it, twirling it effortlessly in his fingertips before suddenly thrusting the hilt into the air to his side. His eyes remained fixated on them, as if daring them to do something. Confusion swallowed the two ninja. What was he doing? They felt it then. It was like the serenity of the graveyard had suddenly vanished, leaving the plain in darkness that gnawed at their hearts. The stranger did it again, the darkness tightening on their insides like just a moment ago, before sheathing his blade. "You have been heard." The doorbell rang, echoing loudly in the small, pleasant-feeling store. The scent of at least 1,000 different flowers filled Sakura's nostrils at once, and she breathed it in, all of it. It seemed like years since she was able to relax, able to walk around Konoha without seeing sadness and destruction everywhere, and, no matter how small it was, the Yamanaka flower shop somehow made the decaying hole within Sakura souse slowly. She traced over the shelves, taking in the gorgeous, ripe plants that were tended to and cared for with passion. It was alarming to walk into such a precious and alive store after what just happened. Those 3 days since she had woken up had gone on forever. Waking up to the news of Hinata's death was mind-numbing enough, but Sakura had no idea what it was like to lose a parent like Shikamaru had. She couldn't even find herself mustering up to say the words "I'm sorry" or "my condolences," as it seemed like it wasn't never enough. It would never be enough. "Sakura," said Pinkette, elevated her head, searching Ino's face for something as the blonde leaned against the counter, her hair falling limply over her shoulder like a waterfall. She tapped her nails on the glass top rhythmically before straightening. "What would you like?" The atmosphere, although so pleasant and relaxing, was also awkward. Neither of them knew what to say. Nothing. She scrutinized her clean hands. They were clean, she was sure of it, but they still felt filthy somehow. Dirt still somehow found its way under her nails, and her finger pads were so coarse that she found it a little strange to round her tips together. The boy. Hinata and Shikamaru's father weren't the only ones to perish. Many others did, even though she did not know them, and that boy, the boy who she risked her life for, was dead. She was told the story when she awoke as well. Shino had left him on the rooftop to head back to save her. Someone else arrived and saved the both of them. Then, apparently, the boy's state of unconsciousness merged into death during that time. Sakura recalled how the Aburaim had trouble explaining it at the point, as Hinata's death was still quite near, and she remembered his body language crystal clear. He kept playing with his fingertips, a habit he might have unconsciously adopted because of the late Hyuga, and while he did look at her, he also didn't. She knew what he was saying anyway. He was sorry. That was enough for her to break down and fling her arms around his neck to pull him into an embrace. She had felt him tense in her arms, and bending over the hospital bed mustn't have been comfortable, but he had relaxed while she cried her heart onto his shoulder. "Sakura." She sucked in air harshly, glancing from side to side before focusing on Ino. She felt water begin to tickle her eyes until it started to hurt, and slowly, inevitably, tears leaked, crawling over her cheeks in one, then 2 drops. They multiplied as the saliva in her mouth increased. Her chest ached as she held in her sob. It took all her effort just to part her lips and croak out, "How's Shikamaru?" She burst out into tears, squatting to the floor and hiding her face with her hands and hair. She didn't care that she was bearing her soul in the middle of a flower shop. She didn't care that someone, some random person, could look through window and see her crying like a baby. She just didn't give a damn. Ino's hands wrapped around her neck in a flash, pressing her head beneath the blonde's chin firmly. Another sob ripped past her lips and she gripped Ino's arms with shaking hands hesitantly before wrapping them around the girl's slim waist. Cold water splattered across her temple suddenly and slid down past her ears, running alongside her own tear trails. Surprised, Sakura tilted her head a little and saw a puffy-eyed Ino, her blue eyes squinting heavily under the frowns on her brow. Saliva deterred her speech and she hastily swallowed, "He's been better." Sakura managed a giggle, even though she was a blubbery mess. She sniffed, "We must look ridiculous." She choked out a laugh, her bangs pasting to her forehead as she pressed her head against Ino's shoulders. Said girl's hands tightened on Sakura's biceps, pinching her skin a little. "And nice one," Ino giggled too. Ruin the MO, she hiccuped, meant billboard brow. The pinkette burst into laughter, sniffling every 2 seconds to avoid a messy nose as well. Let's hope no one sees us, she coughed out, repositioning herself by detaching herself from Ino reluctantly, and staring her friend in the eyes. Blue stared into green. Swallowing, and through downturned lips, Sakura whispered, "How did I ever let Sasuke come in between us?" She shook her head as she spoke before wiping away at her eyes with the back of her palm. "Yeah. You were an idiot," Ino agreed, mirroring her actions. "What a waste of water." She sniffled loudly. "We should have cried over the flowers, Sakura." That alone sent the pinkette into hysterics, collapsing onto the dusty tiled floor and cackling to her heart's content. The hole was repairing itself again, slowly, like always. Commotion outside quietened the two friends, and curious, Ino raised herself off the floor and stole her way to the window, peering out past the glass and seeing a crowd beginning to form around the side of the main path. "What is it?" Sakura voiced from behind. Ino shrugged and sniffled, wiping her nose. "I dunno. Something is coming. Come on. Let's go see." She grabbed the pinkette's hand without another word and yanked her out the door, making sure to flip the open sign to close before running to the back of the mob of citizens. She and Sakura both had to duck once or twice when workers turned around with large planks of wood on their shoulders. "Yikes!" Ino cried as she was about to make contact with someone. She twirled on her toes, lips stuck in surprise as she landed down again, just in time to see the stern, chiseled face of a man that reminded her, somehow, of an older-looking Sasuke, if she ever saw him old. He glanced briefly in her direction as he glided past, his black locks wisping over his eyes and past his ears as he turned back and joined the unnatural group of strangers in the middle of the road, where all the uproar was happening. She followed him with her eyes, jaws slightly lowered, lids and eyebrows high. "Saw Sakura." The pinkette beside her nodded in agreement, apparently awestruck herself. Something suddenly collided with Ino and she yelped in surprise, falling but then suddenly catching on something in mid-air. Snapping her eyes open, she saw a hand grasped around her elbow and Shikamaru's alarmingly warm eyes. He hoisted her up. "Shikamaru!" She quickly wiped away the tears around her eyes, hoping that they weren't bright red from the recent waterworks. "Who was?" He shrugged, cutting her off. "Dunno." He looked back to where the man went, swallowing. Ino and Sakura followed his eyes. Sakura did a double take. "Niji! You too?" The Hyuga did a short lift of the shoulders before stepping up beside the Nara. "He's one of them." "Huh!" Ino raised an eyebrow before noticing what he was talking about. "Oh. You mean the clothes?" She effectively cut him off as he was about to answer her. The four watched in interest as the group of black and white garbed strangers slowly walked down the main street, ignoring the calls and questions from the sidelines as Konoha citizens screamed them at them. "I wonder why they're here," Sakura muttered. "And who they are. I mean, I do know that they were the ones, supposedly, who cleaned up Konoha, but who are they?" "I don't know," Niji responded. "But I have a feeling we're going to find out." There was a brief gap of silence. "Wait," Ino narrowed her eyes, her eyebrows pointing inwards. "Shikamaru, why are you out of the hospital?" He froze, peering at the Hyuga beside him as the Hyuga side glanced back, a slight smile on his lips. You know you shouldn't be out. You could open that cut." "Niji." The brunette looked taken aback that he was being involved in her scolding. "You should have sent him back. You knew he was wounded." "He volunteered to escort me to the graveyard." Ino's reprimanding scowl vanished in an instant at Shikamaru's soft-spoken words. "He visited Hinata while we were there." The blonde crossed her arms. Sakura behind her let her lips lengthen in interest, and took a step back. "You very well might have been out there to visit them, but what else did you boys do? What on earth caused your wound to reopen?" She tapped her fingers on her forearm as Shikamaru's expression morphed from slight anger to absolute surprise as he leered down, panic now evident on his face. "Shit!" Blood was soaking into his casual khaki-colored shirt and spreading quickly. Sakura and Ino tried not to laugh. "Niji!" "What?" The Hyuga looked positively baffled that he was suddenly being blamed again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't." That did it. The two girls burst into fits of giggles at Niji's fearful expression. He glared at them with his infamous glare, but it just sent them into hysterics. Meanwhile, Shikamaru was ignoring them, having already disappeared down the street holding his wound. "Wait." Niji held up a hand. "Let me help." He winced as he took a step forward. He sounded like Hinata again. Damn it. Nonetheless, he shot off after the Nara, leaving behind two girls who were gasping for breath. Wiping tears, this time of mirth, from her eyes, Ino shakily rose to a stand. That was the funniest thing I have ever seen. Sakura giggled, leaning on the blonde's shoulder for support. You obviously forgot about the time that Naruto and Sasuke kissed. Ino howled in laughter, and the two fell into frenzy once more. Luckily no one noticed. So that's them, Asuma grunted, his words muffled by the lit cigarette between his lips. Wisps of light smoke wafted into the air as the fag continued to die. The Jounin's eyes were focused on the 13 Shinigami down below, their attire sticking out like a sore thumb amongst the council members circling them. Shinigami. To all the Jounin, when they had been briefed by the Hokage 2 days ago, apparently after the Shinigami had left, they thought they were a hoax. True, they had not seen them in action, particularly in the way they said they performed their tasks, such as allowing passage for souls. Well, not exactly a hoax, as they certainly did have something different about them, but the idea just seemed too unreal to be true. In a way, they held exact to the quote seeing is believing, and the Jounin intended to watch very carefully. Must be, Kurenai responded, her eyes still held recent despair. Red eyes traced over the alarmingly large forms of a few of them, such as the one wearing a large bucket-sized helmet, and another that had his hair sticking up in all directions with bells attached to the end. Freaks, another Jounin muttered, his arms crossed as he sneered at the Shinigami below. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Now. We are too. The Jounin scowled at the silver-head prodigy. Kakashi's eyes upturned into a smile as he waved a playful hand at the serious ninja beside him. To an extent at least. Look at them, Kakashi, the Jounin scoffed, shaking his head. That one there, he nodded his head towards the one with the large helmet, is not human. Just look at his hands if you could call them that. Hachiro, the silver-head Jounin warned. The other just chuckled and shook him off, turning to another ninja on his other side. Kakashi sighed, shaking his head. Some people. His grin widened beneath his mask as he flipped out his precious orange book and parted the cover, his thumb keeping the pages apart as he began to read. We'll be starting soon, Kakashi, Asuma reminded. Kakashi nodded absent-mindedly. Someone suddenly nudged him at the hip and he tipped slightly to one side, his eyes still trained on the writing on the white paper. Kakashi, my rival. How are you this fine day? Fine. Guy went silent, no doubt trying to keep his cool just like the calm silverhead next to him. He then laughed, throwing an arm around Kakashi's shoulder. Acting so casual, my rival. Business is afoot. He sucked in a loud breath before pressing the side of his head against Kakashi's and pursing his lips to whisper. There's something weird about them. The prodigy Jounin continued reading, not even glancing from his book to take interest in what his fellow ninja was saying. They could match me in speed, maybe, Guy continued, not at all worried that his friend wasn't listening. He suddenly tossed his head back and guffawed. Now wouldn't that be a treat? He slapped Kakashi's back, making the silverhead stumble. Quiet, Kurenai hushed. We're starting. Kakashi peeked over his book. Oh look, Danzo is here. When did he come in? Asuma leaned around the female Jounin. Maybe if you didn't have your nose glued to your book, you would have seen him come in. Who's the kid? I was reaching the climax of the book, and he placed his eye upon the pale boy standing behind Danzo. He shrugged. I don't know. Protection, probably. Shoo! Kurenai hissed, her red-tipped lips becoming full as she twisted them into a gentle snarl. Kakashi sighed, closing his book. Just when I was reaching the best bit. My, isn't this a turnout? Ikemaru sarcastically noted, his head tilting as he veered his vision around the room, taking in the council that he had seen last visit and lingering a little more on the new addition of at least 10 other adults standing behind said council members. He was particularly interested to see another silverhead in the crowd leering down at an orange book in his hands. Almost like his constant smile, the man wore a mask, hinting at the concealment of other intentions, and the headband that all the ninjas seemed to wear was placed diagonally across the man's left eye. Besides the new additions, there was also a filled seat amongst the council members that was vacant last time as well. The spot was filled by a man with shaggy brown hair, bandages hiding half of his face as well, and a white robe-like piece of clothing that was draped over one shoulder. A little behind the ninja was a young boy, pale skin and a mop of straight black hair. His midriff was bare, pronouncing the black clothing he wore even more. Tried to keep your humor to yourself, Aizen whispered as he strode past, heading for his usual position in the lineup order. Jin quietly chuckled. You know I do. A gavel sounded, echoing in the room and silencing all chatter from all corners. He was amused to see the Hokage, the blonde woman who had least had a mind, roll her eyes at the use of the quiet now tool and stretch in her seat. Her assistant had a similar reaction. Let's begin, Koharu stated. Minutes went on as introductions were thrown around. It was like nobody held any real respect for the titles that other people held on their shoulders, specifically the captain title bestowed upon Shinigami. Many of the council had put forth questions about what was included in the stature of a captain, but their request for information was shot down when a short Shinigami, clearly having grown tired of toned-down accusations, snapped back that the members had a long way to go. That only caused more tension. The atmosphere was incredibly thick in the room, so thick that the sharpest blade wouldn't have been able to cut through it, so thick that it was choking. What we are proposing, Captain Yamamoto, Danzo spoke, his voice gravelly like the sound made when two slabs of rocks were ground together, is an alliance between us, the ninja of Konoha, and you, the Shinigami of Soul Society. I believe I speak for every ninja in this room, that this is the real reason why we're here. The leader of the 13 captains raised his white eyebrow, his wrinkles growing more pronounced at the movement. His almost skeletal fingers, which rested over the golden bulb of his cane, readjusted themselves. Indeed it is. Our argument is this, Koharu started. Having this tier being created in your world, and since these hollows, she looked pointedly at the third captain, can only be destroyed by your abilities, we all believe that for both our benefits, yours and ours, that you train several of our ninja to protect us against any future attacks from the hollows. The 12 captains behind the elderly man looked to each other, anger already evident in their eyes at the argument that was made against them. They shuffled their feet slightly, expressing their discomfort, and some even glared vehemently back at council members that were also staring them down. Yamamoto parted his lips, the white caterpillar below his nose lifted. Your argument is valid, but the fact that you speak accusingly against us, as though we purposely created the tear between our worlds, makes us hesitant in accepting your proposal. Every eye in the room turned to the short, white-haired Shinigami. His green eyes glared angrily back, solely narrowed on Koharu, who visibly shuffled in her seat as though disturbed about the menacing glower placed on her. Her lips thinned and the small male's tan skin crinkled on the bridge of his nose as his brow knitted together even more. Such disrespect, she hissed out, her mouth barely opening. Respect is earned, not given. Hitsugaya shook his head as though hinting she was a poor excuse for a human. Koharu whitened. Tsunade tried to suppress a smile on her face as she gave a subtle nod in agreement to the 10th Shinigami captain. However, the action was seen. Tsunade, perhaps you'd fit in better with the Shinigami, considering you're constantly siding with them. Hamura raised an eyebrow, though the minute gesture could hardly be noticed through the folds of his frown on his forehead. She chuckled, resting an elbow on her desk and cupping her chin in her palm. Her eyes twinkled in amusement. I cannot fight against what is right. He grunted in annoyance. It cannot be helped if that little midget is wiser than some of the members of the Ninja Council in this room. Hitsugaya twitched at the reference to his stature, but his chance to snap back, that he was not a midget, was never given as several members rose to their feet, shouting profanities at the laid-back Hokage, who seemed to have erected a barrier at some point as none of the words fazed her. Kakashi rolled his eyes at the back. Fool, Kurenai whispered. How can she so openly insult the council? Asuma took a swig of his cigarette, blowing out the smoke through his chapped lips. I think part of it is because she's bored. Either that or she is attempting to get into the Shinigami's graces, Kakashi added in, glancing at Guy, who was unusually quiet and still so far. It scared the silverhead a little. What? Kurenai widened her eyes. You mean she is lying? No, the prodigy Jounin shook his head. I don't think so. The council is just feeding her the opportunities at the moment, as she does disagree with them, but sometimes she may have to give a few little white lies. Let's hope it doesn't ruin our chances, Asuma shrugged, dropping his fag to the floor and stamping on it, grinding his heel into the tobacco. Enough, Danzo silenced the room and instantly it was quiet. Hitsugaya stepped back into line, though he still had his eyes on Koharu. Is this true, Captain Yamamoto, that you hesitate to lend us a hand because of our accusations, which were unintended? He lowered his head to the white-head Shinigami. Hitsugaya muttered something under his breath. Not exactly, Yamamoto admitted. It is true that the underlying tone behind your argument has somewhat dampened our eagerness to help you, however, it is not the main reason at all. Then what is? Tsunade asked, lacing her fingers. We do not know your bodies, was the curt reply. Whispers broke out. Captain Kuratsuchi. The 12th captain stepped forward, his black and white lips stretched wide to reveal his yellow teeth. He fiddled with his fingertips, excitement evident in his vocals as he breathed in and then out quickly. We know the structure of the Shinigami body, thereby what gives us the opportunity to use our abilities, but you ninja are an unknown. His grin widened even further, making a few of the council members uncomfortable. Kurenai, at the back, shifted her weight on her feet. His tone, his facial expression, everything about him suggested that the prospect of investigating a ninja was like finding a mountain of gold behind a rock. No one looked as though they wanted to speak, but eventually Tsunade did. What would you need to know? The captain's eyes dilated. Oh, everything about you. We will have to know if our techniques can be compatible with yours, as well as additional information. For example? Danzo asked. Just everything that makes you work. The room went quiet at the implication. It was as clear as daylight that he saw the ninja only as interesting subjects that needed to be examined for his curiosity to be quenched. Many council members doubted if he was doing it for the Alliance, and just for his own amusement. Tsunade, again, was the first to speak up. Would you need anything in particular? She swallowed, her throat tight due to the topic. Perhaps a test subject? Several council members leaned back in their seats, as though the obvious insanity about the Shinigami was contagious. A living ninja, I assume? The Hokage asked, raising an eyebrow, her lips thin. Yes. Could we perhaps have him, or her, alive afterwards? The captain's shoulders deflated slightly. Of course. An alliance wouldn't be able to be made if they were not alive. Right. Lady Hokage, you do not seriously suggest handing a ninja over to him? Hamura growled, his face an interesting rusty shade of crimson. No. I don't. She set her honey eyes on the old man defiantly. I intend to get a volunteer. Hamura didn't appear too pleased as he scowled and looked away. A jounin perhaps. Tsunade turned her vision to the back. So that's why we're here, Kakashi sighed, dropped his head into his chest and falling back against the wall behind him. And I thought it was just to watch the show. I dunno, Kurenai bit her lip. I don't think she realized that this would happen. The Silverhead shrugged, not bothering to argue. Any takers? She ran her eyes down the line of nervous jounin. They kept flicking their gaze to the 12th captain, who was positively ecstatic, and then back to their leader, obviously wondering if she was serious, or perhaps insane. You'll survive. The implication of death sent a wave of shivers through half of the jounin. Eventually, with the roll of the eyes, a certain silver-head ninja stepped forward casually. His hands remained buried in the deep pockets of his navy blue pants. With a sigh, he shrugged and held up a hand. I guess I volunteer. Kurenai, Asuma and Guy went rigid, their eyes veering to the relaxed jounin. Suddenly, the taijutsu master placed a hand on his rival's shoulder and laughed. Ho ho, Kakashi. Trying to outdo me, are you? Trying to be the brave one, are we? Guy chuckled again, patting his shoulder and taking in a deep breath. Sign me up. His teeth sparkled as he grinned. Kakashi dropped his head, shaking it ruefully. Behind him, Kurenai and Asuma exchanged amused glances. Tsunade nodded, a satisfied twitch in her lips. Will that be all, Captain Yamamoto and Kuratsuchi? If you are in need of something else to help you with your research, just inquire to me. The two made gestures of agreement. If I may suggest, how about we get a few of our scientists to hasten the process? She asked as she leaned on her palm again. I agree, said Koharu. That way you can actually ask some of our ninja, instead of resorting to your own results. Kuratsuchi chuckled eerily, making the hair on every council member's body to stand up. Science is always right, he responded through bared teeth, his lips pulled back to the fullest. Koharu gritted her teeth. Are you suggesting that our science team isn't capable of giving you genuine information? The captain didn't answer, just tilted his head back to eye the elderly lady properly before he rejoined the ranks. Yamamoto coughed, catching attention. Thank you for your participation. During the research period, however, several of our captains will be returning to Soul Society to perform other jobs, but, he added hastily after seeing several council members open their mouths to retort. I guarantee that they will return in time for the final meeting discussing this topic. Results will be given at this time as well. Do we have an accord? The room was filled with a bitter silence, so much so that it felt like acid against Tsunade's skin. Eventually, after casting a got any complaints look to every ninja, she nodded. Sakura's stomach growled. Ugh, she grumbled as she patted her abdomen, feeling the hollow echo against her hand. She then sighed and continued walking, intent on finding Naruto and taking him up on his offer for a dinner that she hadn't accepted since he left. She cursed to herself at the remembrance of the Uchiha, and hurriedly rethought what had been discussed in the meeting that every ninja in the village had to attend several hours back. The meeting had ended barely 10 minutes ago. It had been 4 days since she had seen these Shinigami arrive, and Sakura thought it was ridiculous that it took that long for the council to decide that it would be beneficial for every ninja to know about it, and curiosity fluttered inside her whenever she remembered them. The others of her age group wholeheartedly agreed, though many of them were glaring at the present Shinigami like they were intending to burn a hole through their skulls. She edged away from Kiba at the start, and remained that way for the rest of the night. Truthfully, it was only Kiba, Niji and Shikamaru that seemed to be the most hostile towards the Shinigami, and Shino to an extent, but the others were not. Tsunade had glossed over what they knew, which she stated was very little, before letting the Shinigami speak. They had introduced themselves. There were 4, Jin Ikimaru, Kiba snarled Soifan, Yamamoto, he was the leader, and Sosuke Aizen. There was a 5th and a 6th, but they were working on some information that the council had wanted, and explained a little more about what the job of a Shinigami was and the tactics, such as Kido. To be fair, Tsunade had Irika and a few other teachers explain similar basics of ninja fighting. The Shinigami looked interested. After that, and while she was relieved that everything was explained, Sakura was tired and she had a headache. Ino's incessant rambles about how Aizen and Ikimaru, as well as the unknown man she had bumped into before, had given the pinkette a sore ear by the time she was able to tear herself away from the blonde. Now alone, and hungry, Sakura swerved onto the main street where all the restaurants and stores were. She made a beeline for Ichiraku Ramen and was thankful to see that Naruto was there. "Hey, Naruto!" He whipped around, sending an array of noodles from his ramen bowl and over the ground as his blue eyes lit up with excitement. Juice dribbled down his chin as he replied, through a full mouth, "MHH, Mauha." She sighed in exasperation as she slid in the seat beside him, flicking away some of the noodle on the bench top. "Hey, Naruto," Kiba and Shino suddenly appeared. "There's this new really popular thing in Konoha." The blonde looked excited once more. "It's called swallowing your food before you talk." He then gave the hyperactive boy a hard pat on the back, causing Naruto to knock over his ramen bowl and choke on his food. "Or chopsticks," Shino muttered absent-mindedly. Sakura, with all her willpower, tried not to laugh. Kiba sidled in on the other side of Shino, who had taken his place beside the pinkette, and was staring at his fingers. She nudged him on the shoulder. "How are you two going?" Shino remained silent, but Kiba replied, leaning back to look over his teammate's bent posture. "We've been better. It's hard to go back to our usual training spot now, and Kurenai is having a little trouble as well. She feels like she failed Hinata." "How?" She frowned. Kiba shrugged. "Something to do with the clan." "And how are the clan handling it?" "The loss of an heiress is tragic, but we all got the feeling that her father was not all that particularly pleased with her level of ability," Shino replied instead, muttering what he wanted to order for his meal right after he spoke. "We've seen him a few times since she died, and his appearance suggested that he's trying not to show how he felt about losing a daughter." Sakura blinked. "What do you mean?" "He's upset as well, Sakura, but the leader of the clan normally has to present a strong image." Shino glanced at her past his sunglasses. She saw his eyelashes twitch. "You wouldn't understand. You're not from a clan." She frowned as she turned away, quickly ordering her meal and then helping Naruto clean up his mess. She offered to pay for another bowl. Waiting for her meal, the pinkette shifted towards the Team 8 members once more. "What do you think about the Shinigami?" Naruto perked up at the topic. Kiba growled. "I hate them." "What?" the blonde yelled. "They're awesome. They saved our asses and they've got super killer moves." The Inuzuka rolled his eyes as Sakura tried to hush her friend down. "No reason to trust them, Naruto," Shino stated. Naruto attempted to peer into the Aburame's eyes, but the tries were fruitless. "The fact that they can destroy hollows while we cannot is bad enough." "Maybe they'll teach us." Kiba snorted. "I doubt it. They don't seem like the type of give out secrets to just anybody." "Neither would we," Sakura interjected. "Then why is the council and the Hokage so hung up on keeping them around? And what's this information that they want anyway?" She flipped her fringe out of her face. "They're trying to make an alliance. Simple as that." Kiba groaned and shook his head, running a hand through his brown mane. "I don't want an alliance with them." Naruto blinked in confusion. "Why not?" "Because I don't like them." "No. You just don't like Jin Ikimaru," Shino finally spoke. Sakura felt herself relax as soon as she heard his voice. She didn't particularly feel like have a word spat with Kiba. Speaking of which, said boy snarled at the mention of the Shinigami and turned in his seat, scowling. "Don't let him get to you. It's obvious he enjoys tormenting people." "What? Dog boy got told by a Shinigami?" Naruto laughed, throwing his head back. Naruto! Sakura punched him on the shoulder, and he yelped in pain, rubbing the skin with care. Kiba's mood was dissolving into anger in mere seconds, but he didn't react. Shino stared pointedly at the blonde. Kiba's honor was ruined, Naruto, and Ikemaru was the one that destroyed it. Don't say it like that. You make it sound like I don't have any left, Kiba muttered. Well, do you? The Inuzuka straightened, swinging around in his seat and facing the conversation once more. I'll prove I've got more honor than him. I'll do anything to beat the dick. He spoke with passion, brandishing a fist in his friend's face. Good, you can start with your anger. Naruto muffled a snort, and Kiba scowled at him. That'll be the day. The blonde then cracked out, tilting back on his seat. The Inuzuka was suddenly behind him, rubbing his knuckles into the skull of the hyperactive boy. What about you getting a brain? Ow. Ow. Ow wow wow. Sakura, ignoring the turmoil beside her, turned curiously to Shino, a finger to her lips and thought. Maybe he could go see Ibiki. The Abirame raised an eyebrow for a split second. Ibiki. He specializes in. Sakura nodded. If this she shrugged, Ikemaru guy had played with Kiba, maybe it's only fitting for him to get a taste of his own medicine. Kiba finished off, punching the air in excitement before grabbing the pinkette by the shoulders and kissing her cheek. You're a genius, Sakura. He slid onto his stool beside Shino, eyes wide with anticipation. Sakura, for that moment, looked gobsmacked, as did Naruto, who was still patting at his hair, and she eventually blinked before stuttering out, no problem. It was clear that Shino was trying not to smile. The only problem with that, Kiba, is that you do not have the patience to inflict damage to a person's mind in the way Ibiki does it. The canine lover pouted. Damn it. I wanna mind screw him. Choice of words, Kiba, his friend warned. The Inuzuka waved him off. He dropped his chin into his cupped hand and gazed mournfully to the ceiling, as if daydreaming the day he defeated Jin Ikemaru. I really like that idea, he said wistfully. Hey, do you think they're planning to ask the Shinigami to train some of us? Sakura piped up on the spot, tapping her fingertips on the bench. If they do, I'm gonna sign up. Naruto cheered, sprouting from his seat and giving peace signs to everyone in the store. Sakura shook her head. I believe that they would be getting well-trained shinobi to complete the task, Naruto deflated, but I agree that that is what the council is planning, Shino concurred, eyeing the steaming sauce in the bowl in front of him. Dinner was almost ready. Yeah, but Kiba started, if they asked for volunteers to be trained, would you accept? Shino paused, contemplating. It would depend on the consequences. Aha! Sakura shouted, making Kiba, Naruto, and to an extent, Shino, jump in their seats. The latter merely twitched, really. What? What is it? Naruto mumbled, climbing back onto his stool. Excited by her discovery, Sakura dropped a fist into her palm, grinning widely. That's why the Shinigami are still here, and that's the information that Tsunade had mentioned they were trying to get, whether or not we can be trained. Naruto and Kiba blinked, while Shino merely nodded. Seems logical. But why would they need to research it? How are we different from them? They're dead, the two rambunctious boys stated at the same time. Shino had no response. Ino thrummed her nails on the glass counter, rolling her eyes in boredom as she tugged at the straps over her apron with her free hand. Adding a dramatic sigh, she groaned and lowered her lids, her eyes aching from the lack of sleep. She was as tired as heck, but for some reason, rest was difficult to come by. Whether it was the constant worry for Shikamaru, Chuji beginning to eat more than usual, if that were possible, or something else, she didn't know. Whatever it was, she wished that it would stop nagging at her. The soft jingle of the doorbell was like music to her ears, pun intended, and she whirled around with a smile. Good morning. Welcome to Yamanaka Flower Shop. How can I help you today? Her cheerful face slightly dropped when she realized who it was. There were two Shinigami staring at her, their builds filling the small store quite easily. Their gaze on her made her fidget, and she shuffled on her feet before grinning again. How do you do? She felt like gagging. Her voice sounded so fake. Aizen approached a flower rack near to the counter, and she watched him closely. You work this shop all by yourself? His fingers played with the small purple petals of some tall flowers, his voice smooth as he spoke. Ino shook her head, feeling her hair raise on her arms. Ikemaru began searching on the opposite side of the store, leaning in close to the center of some plants and sniffing them delicately. No, Jin coughed suddenly and she eyed him in amusement. I don't. I have my parents as well. Interesting. She crossed her arms and leaned on the counter once more, curiosity embedded in her blue eyes as she scanned the brunette Shinigami up and down quickly before settling on his stern but comforting face. Did you know that flowers have a language? He turned to her, and she instantly felt her knees began to wobble when she found herself staring solely into his warm brown eyes. Hook, line and sinker, she mused breathlessly to herself. Really? Ikemara piped up. Ano switched her attention to him. He was currently holding the cut stem of a bundle of purple flowers, the petals drooping towards the floor. What's this? Welcome. Ino beamed, giggling. It's a wisteria. She turned to Aizen, pointing a manicured nail at the flowers he was taking a look at before. Those are monkshood. She attempted not to look him in the eyes, instead leveling her gaze at his chin. They mean beware or a deadly foe is near. The brunette fondled with the purple petals once more, thoughts swimming behind his eyes, thoughts that she so wanted to know. How interesting. Why would you have flowers that mean such negative things? Ino shrugged, finding it difficult, for some reason, to find her voice. I don't know. Some people just pick the flowers for its appearance. I see. Which one is to your liking? The cosmos. Her response was curt. Her fingers instantly the hem of her apron as Aizen focused his brown eyes on her. The knowledge that he was looking at her was so crushing that she couldn't breathe. Ikemara suddenly appeared beside her, his silver hair shadowing his eyes as he stared down at her. Ino took a step back, feeling a chill race down her spine. His grin, broad and eerie, made her skin crawl. Why? Ino took a moment to regain her posture. She straightened her back and furrowed her brow, curling her fingers into her palm. I just do. Now would you please return to the other side of the counter? Ikemara paused before moving his way back. His robes, apparently the white piece of clothing was called a haori, rustled as he walked. Aizen shook his head, approaching the glass counter next. Please accept my apologies for his behavior. Ino felt herself begin to blush at his noble manners. Oh, it's all right. She giggled and scratched the back of her head. I hope you enjoy your stay here in Konoha. Aizen nodded. I thank you. Not every ninja around these parts seem as forgiving and kind as you. His smile widened when Ino's face turned red. A Jin chuckled in the background, his hand resting on the handle for the door. His grin unnerved her as she glanced in his direction, so she hastily stared at her fingers that were currently twirling. When that started, she didn't know. Thank you, I'm Captain Aizen. You're more than welcome. He gave a courteous bow to the blonde. Her mind went blank and all she managed to register was the jingle of the door bell as the two Shinigami left. She sighed, running her hand over her face in exasperation. Get a grip, Ino. He's way too old for you. She began messing around with some decoration paper and ribbons and somehow tied a bow around one of her fingers. She groaned and dropped her hands onto the counter. Geez. As she tore at the orange ribbon around her digits, her eyes wandered over to the monk's hood, and she recalled the thoughtful look in his gaze after she had informed him of the meaning. She sucked on the inside of her cheek in contemplation, resting a palm on the counter and cocking a hip to the side. So, Kakashi, Asuma chuckled, eyeing the other Jounin's face carefully. How are the experiments going? The silverhead quietly groaned, waving at the smoker beside him and collapsing onto the booth opposite him. He plunked his head on the table, his only visible eye looking out the window that overlooked the main street. Asuma merely laughed again, snubbing his smoke in the tray. You know, my team will be coming soon. Barbecue Day. Kakashi groaned again. Wow. Now I'm curious. That Shinigami is quite interesting, he replied at last, his tone like a drawl. To say the least. His enthusiasm for science rivals that of guys for youth. Impressive. Asuma whistled. It's a headache. So, what are you two actually doing in there? Heard that another Shinigami is in there as well. Yeah. Kakashi lifted his head, scratching his scalp and ruffling lopsided hair. Her name is Ninyu. Very close to Kuratsuchi. There's some obvious connection between them. Asuma raised an eyebrow in response. Not like that. Something else. He yawned, leaning back into the booth. I made a mistake by volunteering. How so? Kuratsuchi found out about the Sharingan. Asum began choking on his spit as he gripped the edge of the table tightly. You're kidding. Do I look it? No. Exactly. So, he's asking questions about that, and you'll never believe this. Humor me. Kakashi sighed, stretching his arms and leaning forward once more, resting his elbows on the table. For both our benefits, the council is foolishly letting the Shinigami take a look at how bloodline traits would go if chosen for training. Asuma shook his head in despair, raking his fingers through his fringe and beard. They've gone insane. What did the Hokage have to say about it? The Silverhead shrugged. Outvoted by a landslide. Those Shinigami all seem to be sweet talkers, especially that captain from the 5th Squad, Aizen. No argument there. He had visited Kurenai's team and the Hyuga clan 2 days ago, expressing his apology for the death of Hinata. Did he not do the same for others? For Shikamaru as well. The genius ignored him. Just stuffed his hands into his pockets and walked off with an oath. Oath? That's right. Asuma laughed, sliding out a smoke from the packet and lighting it. Considering all the time you and Guy have spent indoors recently, you wouldn't have heard. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. Heard what? Several of our students have made oaths against the Shinigami, claiming undying hate for them. A bit dramatic. Asuma shook his mane, taking a puff from his fag. Shikamaru, Niji and Kiba, those 3 in particular. The Hyuga? He raised his eyebrows in surprise. The other Jounin nodded in affirmation. They're all just a little confused. I have a feeling that they just wanted someone to blame, and who better than the people who saved them? What about the others? He waved a hand in half-dismissal. They're more or less fine. Sensei. The 2 Jounin looked up to see the rest of Team 10 approaching them from the entrance. Shuji had instantly slid into the seat beside Asuma, while Ino and Shikamaru remained standing, the latter eyeing Kakashi in question. So you're finally out of their grasp? He stated monotonously, his lips thin. Huh? Kakashi rubbed the back of his head. Oh. Not really. I'm still a lab rat. Speaking of which, I gotta go. He sidled out. Here's your seat back. Shikamaru watched the Silverheads back as the Jounin left the barbecue restaurant and strolled down the street casually. His eyes narrowed. Tenten breathed out heavily, eyes focused on the target and the weapon she had just thrown. It was off-center just a little, but she wasn't overly worried as she had been training for the past 3 hours. Despite Guy not being able to be there for their training sessions, the team were still obligated to continue by themselves. Taking in a deep collection of air, her chest expanding simultaneously, Tenten released it in a gush. Her fingers were burning slightly from the extended contact and rubbing with metal and leather, and the sensation returned as she pulled several kunai and shuriken from her holster and slid into her stance. She disappeared, suddenly in the air, and with a quick twirl, she released all her weapons onto the targets surrounding her. She fell back to the lush grass, feeling satisfied with the sharp thuds as the points of her blades dug into the targets. Scoping her attempt, she beamed once she saw that she nailed it. Not bad. The weapons mistress started, whirling around, instantly taking in the short feminine figure standing arrogantly atop the branch overshadowing the training area. She recognized the black robes, the white haori and the short blue hair and long plaits at once. It was Soifan, the Shinigami captain. She materialized before Tenten, her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the multitude of weapons poking out from each of the targets. She set her contemplating gaze on the ninja. I take it you excel in blades. It wasn't a question. Tenten nodded slowly, swallowing to moisten her parched throat. Her whole body was aching from the exercise. Soifan looked around again before smiling. Not bad at all. Tenten grinned. The month had gone by way too fast, Tsunade had decided. It felt like just yesterday she was condemning Kakashi and Guy to some wacky experiments, which they had successfully survived with all their human pieces, and so the imminent meeting, of the one she was heading to right now, was incredibly daunting. This meeting would decide what would happen with the alliance between ninja and Shinigami. She was getting nerves. Tsunade never felt anxious, unless she knew something wrong was going to happen. And she just knew something was. After all, she was winning her gambles for the past 2 days, earning her loads of cash and respect from Aizen and Ikimaru, who had accepted her proposal for a poker game, and often winning such things meant something bad was going to happen. Just when? She knew, though. She knew as she hurried through the halls, her heels clicking on the tiles, that today, something was going to happen and it was not going to be good. The doors within sight, she sucked in a breath, casting a glance to Shizen at the same time, and pushed the double doors open. Captain Mayuri Kuratsuchi. Have you finished your research? Kohara asked, tilting her head a little towards him as he stepped forward, a stapled stack of papers in his hand. I trust that our scientists and ninja were adequate? He made no comment about it, just beamed excitedly. Tsunade waved a hand at him as she spoke. Please begin. A month is hardly enough time to research everything there is to know about you. You should be glad we gave you permission to even experiment on our own jounin, Hamura hissed. Kuratsuchi continued, acting like he hadn't heard the snide comment. Enough information has been gathered regarding the topic of Shinigami training ninja. In short, it is possible for a ninja to learn Shinigami abilities. However, it looked as though several council members had wanted to shoot up in excitement at the knowledge, but they remained stiff in their seats, obviously intimidated by the scientist. There are quite a few consequences. We have gathered that the ninja body possesses a network of chakra that allows them to complete your jutsus. Shinigami has a different sort of energy, Ryoryoku. At first, since they're both completely different energies, it was hypothesized that a ninja could not obtain Shinigami abilities, but this proved false. There is a method. Delving into the matter of chakra, our scientists have located thin strands, hints, of Ryoryoku. Does that mean that it is possible? Kohara put forth. Oh, there's a lot more to it. As I said, there are consequences. She paled, along with Hamura and a few other members of the council. This base of Ryoryoku would help a ninja to gain our abilities. However, the consequences are these. Sakura twisted her body to the side, moving her hip out as she dodged a fast punch from Naruto. His orange sleeve and blonde hair the only things she saw before she countered, thrusting a clenched hand into his side. She gritted her teeth in annoyance as the figure of her teammate disappeared in a cloud of smoke, causing her vision to be foggy as she searched from right to left, hoping to catch sight of him. She jumped out of the smoke and onto the clear grassy area, scanning quickly once more. Naruto attacked again from the side. Sakura dropped to the ground as he leapt into the air, and she placed a quick roundhouse kick to his gut. Once again, he disappeared into smoke. Cut it out, Naruto! As soon as she thought this, her jumpsuit-clad teammate appeared all around her, trapping her in a circle of orange and yellow. Watch out, Sakura! The 7 clones called out as they sprung forward, their fists raised, ready to attack her. She blocked, stopping the one in front with her palm before she twisted and lowered, avoiding the attacks as they grazed over her head. She threw the captured Naruto into the ones before her and 3 of them disappeared simultaneously. Quickly, without hesitating, she swept her leg across the grass, her shin making in contact with a few of the clones. On contact, they disappeared. Sakura was suddenly flown across the field, thanks to a direct punch by the real Naruto. She winced as she moved her limbs and tensed her stomach, the skin on her cheek tender from the hit. Slowly, she rose to her feet, wiping the blood from her lips and curling her fingers into her palm. This was it. The 2 teammates ran towards each other, kunai flipping out and darting towards them, and they both deflected the weapons with ease. As soon as they were about to make full frontal contact, a puff of smoke appeared in between them. Kakashi's spiky, anti-gravity hair was revealed slowly before the rest of his form, the familiar orange book held in his hand. His eyes darted across the page. Why'd you stop us, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto reprimanded, stamping his sore feet on the ground and huffing. Sakura, honestly, wasn't complaining. Their teacher eyed the both of them, mock confusion in his eyes as he surveyed their grimy faces. Oh. Why? I asked you first. Naruto shoved a finger into Kakashi's face. The jounin blinked, lowering Naruto's hand from his personal bubble as he put his book away into his pocket. Sakura was curious now. Why did he do that? He could have easily taken the both of them on if that was why he was there, to help train them. She watched with interest as her teacher's eyes closed and then opened to a narrow. You can come out now. Huh? The students asked at the same time. Impressive. You ninja are quite observant, a familiar, slippery voice echoed from within the trees. In seconds, a white and black blur appeared before them and the memorable wide smile and silver hair made him known. Jinikimaru, Kakashi stated, fingers twitching. The Shinigami eyed Naruto and Sakura, the latter shivering under his squinted gaze, before shifting to the jounin. He raised an arm in greeting. Bingo. What business do you have in this field? He merely shrugged. So I need a reason for watching developing ninja spar? He chuckled, the atmosphere thickening with every word he spoke. You know why I'm here. His lips stretched a little more. Kakashi's hands turned into fists. But since I'm caught, and I am bored, he breathed in, how about a round, Hataki? Naruto looked positively ecstatic at the mention of a spar between his sensei and a Shinigami, while Sakura just raised an eyebrow, her top lip lifting. Eh? Jin patted her head, chuckling. Kakashi stiffened, as did Sakura, but for a different reason. Please! Oh, please! Please, please, please. Naruto begged loudly, his hands folded and his eyes closed as he jiggled up and down. Naruto, Kakashi sighed, though a warning was beneath his tone, something that the blonde did not notice. Oh, come on, Kakashi-sensei. His eyes sparkled brightly up at one of his idols. Sakura groaned in embarrassment before giving in to her thoughts. It would give us the opportunity to study a Shinigami's tactics, she suggested with a smile. She gave Jin a flicker of a look. Kakashi stared at Ikemara for a moment, his lid shading over his eyes, emphasizing the bags under his eyes from the lack of sleep due to the experiments that had ended 4 days ago. He fiddled with his glove a little, testing how firm it was in his hand. Fine. Yay! Naruto tossed his hands in the air, jumping up and down and from side to side as he latched onto Sakura's elbow and yanked her to safety. Jin nodded in satisfaction, turning around, his Haori shifting with him, and walking to the other side of the clearing. Sakura, for the briefest of moments, had seen his eyes lock onto hers and his smile widen. She shivered as the two adults slid into their stance, Naruto and her standing at the sidelines in the middle, waiting eagerly for the spar to begin. Meanwhile, Ino was ending her shift at her parents' shop, pinning up her pink, frilly apron on the hook by the door that led upstairs. My shift's over, Mama, she called out. I'm going out. Fine, honey. Have fun. Yep. I will. Is Dad taking over? Yes. When he gets back from his outing with Chusa. She mumbled something incoherently afterwards, no doubt directed to her husband's drinking habits with his buddy. Ino giggled. Going now? She waved a hand at the door as she turned, a smile on her face as she adjusted her purse strap with her free hand. Miss Yamanaka. Eek. Ino squeaked, blue eyes widening at the sudden person before her. Her heart pounded hard against her chest, and she breathed out slowly, trying to calm it down. She sighed, a hint of relieved laughter in her voice. Captain Aizen. You scared me. She swallowed. The brunette Shinigami smiled politely. My apologies. She waved a hand at him, taking in a breath again. No. It's all right. Normally I have the doorbell as warning. He glanced over his shoulder to the tiny golden bell above the door before returning his brown eyes back to the blonde who was now breathing normally, a crooked smile on her face. It did go off. It did? She perked an eyebrow, moving past the Shinigami and lifting herself onto her tippy toes to inspect the bell. Well, it's not broken, she mumbled. She lowered herself back down. It's okay. It doesn't matter. If you're looking for some service, I just finished my shift and while I am here, could you wait until… She cut herself short, blinking. Chuckling awkwardly, she smiled at him. You know, how about I help you before I go out? Aizen laughed at her quick change of attitude, her cheeks tinted red. No, it's actually something else I need your help with. Huh? Her jaw dropped at his sentence, and she shook her head quickly, trying to regain her senses. I mean, come again? He chuckled. I was wondering if I could take you to a particular place and ask some questions. Ino took a smidgen of a step back at his offer. And what place did he mean? Most of all, what questions did he want to ask her of all people? She cocked an eyebrow, thin fingers on her left hand twirling the strap of her purse, on her right shoulder, around the tip. What questions? He smiled politely, walking past her and opening the door. She made quick note of the bell ringing and felt a certain dark feeling bloom inside of her, as she realized that it did indeed work and that she was positive she hadn't heard it sound before. Attractive, yes, but this man was still too damn charming. There were hardly any in Konoha, so, in her case, it was like a breath of fresh air. The door held open for her. Aizen merely responded with you'll see. In that case, she had no choice. She was mesmerized. He moved flawlessly and confidently in the spar, the smile on his face never wavering. And she had felt something, a feeling, swell up inside of her as she watched him closely, watched how he moved, how he dodged, how he attacked. It was like an improvised dance that left her breathless. Wide green eyes continued to watch him as he avoided an attack from Kakashi by flipping to the side, the fluttering ends of his robes shivering as the force of the fireball shot past him, leaving behind a circular black patch where he was. He turned, eyed the spot, a slight frown on his brow, before his smile returned. That was new, he remarked, firmly replacing his hold on his katana. Sakura was entranced by his blade as well. He moved like they were one, which they were, so easily and so simply that the pinkette thought it would be a cinch to master the technique. She knew, once she had regained her right mind, that it definitely wouldn't. You haven't seen anything just yet, Kakashi retorted. His headband was still placed diagonally across his eye. So your plan to finally resort to something else instead of hand-to-hand, dear? The Jounin straightened, flexing his fingers. Until the end of this spar, yes. Ikemara shrugged. Dunno when dat will be. I wanna see what's behind dat headband of yours. Kakashi smoothly slid back into a stance, his arms ready for hand signs. You haven't earned that privilege just yet. Nah. Perhaps not. He began pacing. The 12th captain has told us a bit, though, about what you're hiding. Kakashi stiffened. Jin laughed humorlessly. Bloodlines, eh? Kekkei Genkai's is what they're called, yeah? The Jounin's silver eyebrows knitted dangerously, his muscles taut in his legs and arms. I should have known that any information would have been passed on to the rest of you. Yeah, you're Shirave, but, as you know, Dad isn't the only reason I'm here. He stretched playfully, sending a glance to the two genin who were watching and listening in on the conversation with close senses, attempting to pick up on any subtle hints. Enough. Let's spar. Kakashi's hands blurred as he performed some signatures for a jutsu, and at the same time, Ikemara prepared himself, waiting for whatever the ninja was planning to do. Seconds later, and multiple figures of the Jounin appeared in a loud puff of smoke, side by side. Well now. Isn't that interesting? Jin chuckled. Clones. You obviously haven't seen the true extent of the powers of shinobi. Oh? Do enlighten me. The two silverheads leapt for each other. That's right, Lee. I've got it. I've got it. Keep at it. Tenten and Niji sighed, the latter more inconspicuously than his teammate. Ever since the attack, so around a little more than a month ago, he had been a slightly different person, perhaps the same person as he was before the Chunin exams, except a little more passionate, much to Tenten's chagrin. It wasn't the type of passionate that Lee and Guy was into, and she cast the two green beasts a mortified look as they hugged each other like they usually did. Instead, the passion was more of an emotion than anything else. Hinata's death had hit him harder than she thought, and he had grown to be more expressive about his anger towards who he blamed, the Shinigami. Tenten had asked why several times, but Niji had never given her a proper response, as though he was trying to figure out the answer to that question himself. She wasn't opposed to the Shinigami. In fact, she found that she was getting gradually used to their presence, particularly Soifan, who had been studying her skills and weaponry very closely, even giving some very small hints every now and then. Her thoughts suddenly returned back to Niji's out-of-character hate towards the Shinigami. Tenten groaned quietly. The Hyuga had given her a look, and she pivoted towards him, hands on her hips and her brown eyes narrowed. She changed the emotion in her eyes to a somewhat warmer one, as though showing him that she wasn't intending to be scolding him. I'm tired of this, Niji. He remained mute, staring at the two taijutsu users. Stop it. Why don't you like them? Just talk to. I just don't. Tenten, he interrupted bitingly, his jaw rotating as he ground his teeth together. I wouldn't expect you to understand. The weapon's mistress twisted the ends of her lips into a snarl. What? So just because I'm not a part of a stupid clan, it automatically means that. Watch it, Tenten. Stop interrupting me, she yelled, her body shuddering at the sudden burst of emotion in her words and flooding irritation in her bulk. Niji's eyes narrowed, his lips thinning. As I recall, you didn't even give a damn about her. Tenten. Before the Chunin exams, she continued, ignoring his hostile expression. And now, suddenly, after 2/3 months, you act as though she was someone you had held close for years. Tenten, he warned again. No. She grabbed her head in frustration, fingers weaving through her brown fringe. I realized that she was your cousin, Niji, but never have I seen you act like this about anything. His hands were clutching his opposite arms so tightly that his knuckles were going white, and his face had turned a pale tint as well. Tenten dropped her arms to her side, they felt like weights. Why do you hate the Shinigami so much? She paused. It can't only be because Hinata was killed when. Enough. His tone was finalizing and the female brunette shut her lips obediently, her face muscles taut and eyes shimmering. He opened his mouth but then shut it, breathing out slowly, his nostrils flaring. He tilted his head to the side, his orbs filled with anger. I, just. Do. Okay? He looked away, lightly sucking on the inside of his cheek. You wouldn't understand. Tenten huffed. Try me. They locked eyes. Well, I think it's cause he's embarrassed that complete strangers had defeated what he could not. The team twirled to the source of the new voice. Soifan was there, standing on the branch of a tree like Tenten had seen her arrive many times before already. The Shinigami smirked, jumping to the clearing and eyeing Guy and Lee with a confused expression before putting her hands on her hips. "Why are you here?" Niji hissed, fists clenched. "Freetown, for us Shinigami at least. Your council has been rather hospitable. So it's true that you're here for obvious other means." "Of course. Although it's clearly not obvious if you had to solidify it." Niji scowled. "Leave. Temper is in check. One of those committed ninja, I see." "Are you?" he snapped back. "Me?" Soifan chuckled. "You probably won't get the opportunity to see just how committed I am to being a Shinigami captain." She shrugged, her plates bouncing against her back. "Then again, the others may see some potential in you." "Potential?" Tenten asked. Soifan bit her bottom lip in a thinking manner. "I'm sure you'll all be notified." "I have potential," Niji interrupted, his lips twisted into a deadly snarl directed towards the Shinigami. She nodded, lifting her shoulders before dropping them. "As a ninja, perhaps." She beamed at their confused expressions, Lee's and Guy's ecstatic ones as well, before she blurred into the air, leaving behind no hint of her former presence. "So the council does plan to train ninja in Shinigami ways," Niji mused, body taut but then loosening smoothly as his expression relaxed a little. He turned to Tenten, a slight smile on his lips, of excitement or something else? "I'm in." Camellia, good luck gift for a man. Honeysuckle, happiness. Yellow hyacinth, jealousy. Magnolia, nobility. That one? Ino peered over Aizen's outstretched arm to see the bunch of flowers in the semi-distance, the light breeze playing with the petals and leaves. Oleander, caution. She had been studying this Shinigami for the last 20 minutes, looking at his facial expressions, body language, or anything else about him that would prove to satiate her curiousness for him. What this curiosity for him entailed, she had no idea, though he was an attractive man, but somehow, she felt there was something more to it than just him being nice-looking. The thought still made her blush. So far her studying proved fruitless for any other hidden means. He was, through and through, a charming, aristocratic man that had a special way with words, and she meant a very special way with words. He was calm, collected, and curious with what she knew and what flowers meant, genuinely curious she liked to think, since Ino hadn't met anybody who had given her no choice but to give them a lesson on the language of plants. It was nice, refreshing, and his company was rather warm and light-hearted. Where is this cosmos? Ino was torn from her thoughts like lightning dashing across the dark sky. Blue eyes gradually focused on brown ones, framed by black-rimmed glasses. The fact that she still found him attractive, despite the fact that he wore glasses, surprised her. She wouldn't admit, ever, that she was shallow, however, even though Shikamura had often said she was. Huh? Does my presence really leave you speechless? His lips curled into a teasing smile that made her heart leap. Ino felt like facepalming herself. What? An idiot. I mean, no. No. No, it doesn't, she added hurriedly. Aizen's face showed a flicker of undiscernible emotions, and Ino instantly thought that what she had said was wrong. I mean, yes. Wait, no? I mean, she sighed, sagging her shoulders. I was lost in thoughts. My apologies. Aizen laughed. It seemed as though you were very deep into them. Ino nodded dumbly, though was slightly peeved but flattered that he found her amusing. More peeved actually because she didn't like being laughed at. I was. A penny for your thoughts? Or in this case, yen? The blonde looked up, dumbfounded that the Shinigami captain had conjured up a joke. Well, he did have a sense of humor. She had noticed that before, but it was like she only realized it then. What a fool. She laughed but suddenly quietened when another thought flitted through the front of her brain. I have a thought I'd like to share with you. I mean, it wasn't what I was thinking before, but it is a thought anyway, so. Aizen chuckled. Go on, and then you could show me this cosmos you favor. Ino felt her cheeks heat up. He knew. Oh, he so totally knew. He knew that she was attracted to him. Again, she felt like face-palming herself. Can I be subtle for one time in my life? Well, I just wanted to ask about you and like the other captains? She titled her head to the side in uncertainty. Of course. What would you like to know? He held an arm behind her back and gentle nudged the small of it so that she'd get the hint to walk with him. She did, stumbling in surprise at the contact at first before straightening up. His brief touch was still making her skin tingle. They waded through the field of assorted flowers, their ankles brushing the soft petals and leaves. My friend and I saw a few of you a while ago. What was that about first of all? I believe your village elders will inform you of that in due time, but through deduction skills, the answer should be deduced. His words were cryptic, and the formality in which he spoke made it seem all the more confusing as Ino tried to decode his words. She had discussed it with Sakura and the rest of their teams at one point, she was sure of it. She quickly realized. They're saying that the council and the Hokage plan to train ninja into Shinigami. Is that why you were here? To discuss that? She blinked like a little child begging for candy, or in this case, information. Aizen chuckled. That is correct, there's more to it of course. Whether if it is possible. Observant. When the occasion calls for it. Shouldn't it all through the day and night? Touché. The brunette Shinigami chuckled. Yes. One of our captains and his lieutenant had been spending a month studying and analyzing the body of a ninja, their function, their abilities, their diets, and the like. He examined her from the corner of his eyes. Your jutsus and techniques. Isn't that confidential? Ino asked slowly. Believe me, I'm as surprised as you are about the acceptance of such valuable knowledge being divulged to us, especially since I've seen your council, not so much your Hokage, to be rather rude, to say the least. Ino smothered her laughter with a cough. Aizen smirked. Then again, we were only told of the more common and most practiced jutsus, such as the Henjin Academy. One of us had attended a lesson to learn more. It was interesting. Ino beamed. We're fascinating, aren't we? Indeed. He stopped, the blonde copying, and stared down at her. She felt like she was being pushed into the dirt. Though I'm sure you are just as curious about us as well. Despite her fluttery stomach, Ino nodded and attempted to copy his tone and voice as she said, Indeed. Aizen laughed. How many captains are there? 13, plus 13 lieutenants as well. They are often well known amongst the Shinigami ranks, particularly the captains. Which number are you? 5th. Could you tell me some of the others' names? They continued walking, Ino leading the way through the meadow and then into a cluster of thin trees. You wouldn't know them. Maybe I will sometime. I see your point. Actually, she glanced over her shoulder, conflicting thoughts shivering in her eyes. There is just one I'd like to know the name of. Aizen raised an eyebrow, despite the fact that she couldn't see it. Oh? Describe him. He had noticed, or at least figured, that it was a male, of course. He had black hair. She stepped over a fallen log. And it was long and... Byakuya Kachiki, 6th Captain. Ino jumped in surprise, whirring around. How'd you? Aizen chuckled. It was quite obvious. Ino pouted, sucking on the inside of her cheek. Fine. She pivoted again, hair streaming around her like a falling ribbon, and trekked on, another clearing becoming visible through the thin scatter of forest trees. After your meeting, all of you suddenly disappeared. Why? A select few were chosen to stay behind at the time to study ninja life at their leisure, also to remain in case of any emergencies. It was also a bridge for an alliance between you and us. Ino suddenly sighed, hands together in front of her chest. We're here. She whirled around, giggling, grabbing onto his hands before she realized what she was doing, and lugged him into the white field. His eyes widened at her forward attitude, but he let himself be tugged along nonetheless, a smile on his face that bared his teeth a little. Cosmos, peaceful. It was about halfway into the field that Ino became lucid and she quickly dropped his hands, erasing the awkwardness soon after by opting for a pirouette, and then some more twirls, moving away from his figure. Aizen merely watched with a content posture, his arms folded into his haori as the white flowers danced around him, and with her. Jin backflipped, his clothes fluttering through the gushing wind until he landed smoothly onto the grass further back, dodging a nasty midsection swipe with the kunai from Kakashi who had just performed a clone technique, attempting to confuse the Shinigami. As soon as he landed, Ikimaru's smile decreased into a thin line as strands of his silver hair fluttered before his eyes. Kakashi centered himself, sensing an impending threat. Gripping the hilt of his katana again, Jin slid his feet back into position. 20 minutes of playful spar was now going to turn rough. Naruto and Sakura felt the tension and hostility flood the atmosphere at once that it was like fumes choking them. Hair straightened on their skin and their body gave a gentle quiver, as though winter had set in seconds. He sprung, appearing before Kakashi in milliseconds, his katana shifted for swipe to the side. The blade caught the Jounin's side and instantly the body exploded like a balloon, clouding Jin's vision with smoke. He shunped out of the smoke and into the clearing, quickly readjusting his hold on his katana to block a sudden attack from above. His lids peeled open to reveal lightning blue, two elite fighters' eyes locked, determination swimming in their expression. Kakashi furrowed his brow, pushing himself off of the failed attack and springing back, putting a string of hand seals together in seconds, giving Jin hardly enough time to straighten himself and dodge as a flurry of fire came bulldozing towards him. Ikemaru blocked again with his Zanpakuto as the fireballs came within distance. The searing heat flushed the sides of his cheeks and ears as he swiped at each ball of fire. He grunted as he twirled his katana around, effectively using the wind to blow the fire off course. They went plummeting into the air in all directions, luckily not near the two genin who were watching wide-eyed. The Jounin was soon on the defense. Jin had come in for a proper attack, his pointed blade nothing more but a flurry of silver as he attempted to snag a piece of Kakashi's clothes to hold him still. Said ninja was dodging furiously, sweat outlining his brow. Twang! Metal met metal, katana on kunai, and the two glared at each once more, pushing their strength into their extended arms. Lines suddenly layered down past Jin's eyes and he soon found himself compressed together, his arms held against his body by some thin wire that was coiled around him like a snake. He hissed as Kakashi delivered a blow to the underside of the jaw with the elbow. It hit. At the same time, as the Shinigami grunted in pain, and muttered 2 or so words undiscernibly, and was raised slightly in the air by the force of the blow, a flash of white seared past Kakashi's midriff, ripping through his flak jacket and burying into the soil behind him. Eyes wide, the Jounin quickly assessed, seeing the wire he had spiraled around the Shinigami coming loose due to his katana severing it at his side. Jin teetered as he landed, his blade ripping more of Kakashi's clothing as his feet felt earth. He ripped the wire off in irritation, his other hand still half pinning Kakashi in the spot. The Jounin could break himself free if desired by merely pulling himself from the blade. I'm sure there's 1,000 other moves dancing round your head, One Eye, but... Oh yeah? The sound of fluttering clothes caught his attention in the nick of time. Jin half turned, seeing a clone of Kakashi zero in on him. Gritting his teeth, he glanced back at the other version of the ninja, only to see it disappear in a puff of smoke and to reveal a large log with his blade buried in the side. He hissed, withdrawing his wakizashi to its normal size and then shifting around, brandishing Shinso in front of him before coming at Kakashi head-on. There was a flurry of actions and the sound of Sakura's gasp as dust and dirt smothered the clearing in a brown haze. The genin coughed, covering their eyes and waiting for the soil to settle back down. What happened? Naruto asked, hacking. Sakura peered through squinted lids to see now 3 figures on the sparring field. The dust finally dispersed, the clearing flooded with a silence that was soon interrupted by a, what the heck happened? Kakashi, his body half buried under the ground, had his outstretched hand pinned to the grass by the tip of another pointed katana through his baggy sleeve. Jin's attack, his arm lifted to deliver a stab to the shoulder, was being held back by another hand, slender fingers wrapped around his wrist. I do believe that some unnecessary blood was about to be shed, the newcomer stated monotonously. TCH. Ikemaru scowled before pulling his wrist from the grasp of the other Shinigami. Perfect timing, as usual. Sakura felt her jaw drop to the earth as she took in the man who had interrupted the spar. It was the Sasuke look-alike again, only this time she had seen him, briefly, in battle. He even had the same look in his eyes as he appraised Ikemaru and released Kakashi's sleeve. He was, for lack of better word at that moment in time, beautiful. If I had not intercepted, then the struggle for creating this alliance would be bruised. Jin shrugged nonchalantly. Just a spar, Kachiki. It was not just a spar, Ikemaru, the black-haired Shinigami stated sternly. Many ninja do not trust us already, so do not give them another reason to. By this point Kakashi had pulled himself from the earth and was dusting off loose soil on his clothes. He had his eyes trained on the 2 Shinigami before he approached his 2 students, inspecting the tiny hole in his sleeve by poking a finger through it. He sighed as stopped in front of them. That was brilliant! Naruto screamed, waving his arms around excitedly. I didn't know what happened, but it was great! Sakura, having to force herself to tear her gaze from the black-haired Shinigami, agreed profusely by nodding her head vigorously. I wonder who would have won if it wasn't interrupted. By the way, sensei, who is that? She pointed at the man she was interested in. Byakuya Kachiki, Kakashi replied. Didn't sense him coming. He's fast. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto started, scratching the side of his head. It was strange how his mood had suddenly fizzled out to blatant confusion. Is what that guy said true? About ninja not trusting them? Yes. Why? The Silverhead sighed, tussling Naruto's blonde hair so that it was even wilder than before. You'll find out eventually. 2 weeks. It had been 2 weeks since the last known interesting event had happened between any of the genin, with the addition of Shikamaru and the Shinigami. He was curious, and burning for answers with what was going on. There was no doubt, nor a secret, that the council and Hokage planned to train ninja, and that the rumors of information being gathered to decide whether it was possible was confirmed. Guy had blurted it out by mistake. So, in return, Shino Aburame was alert of his surroundings. After the meeting had ended 2 weeks and 3 days ago, the captains had left, but now, more were trickling in at untimed paces, so it wasn't a surprise to see a new face around suddenly. That was no reason, however, not to be on his guard. He had known, since he had left dinner with his fellow genin, that he was being watched and followed, and he had an inkling that it was a Shinigami. He didn't know a single ninja who would follow him like that, as they all knew that they'd be found swiftly, thanks to his bugs. But which Shinigami? Shino pretended to ignore the presence 20 feet back, preferring to act like he didn't know they were there as he strolled down the empty street. It was night and he was heading home, to the manor. However, curiosity got the better of him, and he suddenly stopped. His hands remaining in his pockets, Shino waited, stretching out his chakra to touch the Shinigami following him. He heard some muttered curses, ones that he wouldn't have heard if he were a non-ninja or a little further away, before he decided to retract his bugs. You can come out. I know you're there, he informed, not turning around to face the other. Some light footsteps sounded in his ears, proving that the Shinigami had moved out of his hiding place. Why were you following me? Humph, curiosity, was the curt reply. The voice was young but still deep. Shino shifted to the side, his brown eyes taking in the small form of a silver spiky-haired captain, his blade slung on his back. Which one are you? The Shinigami's eyes furrowed at the question. 10th Captain, Toshiro Hitsugaya. You can call me Captain Hitsugaya. I owe you no formalities, unless you give me mine. Hitsugaya shifted at the response, as though put out by it. What is your status? I am a member of the Aburame clan. Its heir. The captain seemed to recognize the stature and nodded in understanding. An agreement then, that we speak with formality. Shino didn't reply, but his silence was taken for a yes nonetheless. Why were you following me? The real reason? I could tell you are a good fighter, but I wanted to know a little more. What have you learned? Control over bugs, insects. That's how you found me, wasn't it? I could sense you on my footsteps since I left dinner. Hitsugaya paused, as though inwardly berating himself for being caught. More observant than I thought. Is that because I'm young? Or because I'm a ninja? I don't want to make enemies with every ninja I come across. Take it merely as me being in the dark of what your abilities were. Shino lifted his shoulders as a shrug. Fine. Anything else? No. Just go about your business, and ignore that I am there. I don't take too kindly with having someone watching me. I'm not watching, Hitsugaya responded with a smirk. I'm analyzing. Sakura! Sakura! A chorus of loud bangings could be heard from downstairs, and the young female ninja groggily lifted her head, her lids trying their hardest to part to allow her to see. Her vision was blurry as she groaned in tire and rubbed her eyes, yawning as she stretched out her back in bed. Sakura! Wake up! The pinkette opened an eye, staring at her bedroom interior as she listened to the loud knocking downstairs. With a roll of her eyes, she cracked her back and slid out of bed, tossing the covers over it as she stretched again. Naruto. Yawning again and wiping her eyes, Sakura stole her way downstairs, still in her green checkered PJs as she approached the dining room. Her feet hit the cold tiles and shivers slithered up her spine, effectively waking her up properly. Sakura! I'm coming, she growled out, opening the front door and backing away just in time to see Naruto's blonde head poke in and his blue eyes shine brightly at her. He gave her a foxy grin and entered her home. You're lucky my parents like taking walks in the morning. He merely cackled as she closed the door behind him. Naruto, why are you here so early in the morning? He cracked his eyes open, as though confused about why she was asking. Oh. Was wondering if you wanted to go out to breakfast with me. Sakura sighed, holding back a yawn. Naruto, she caught sight of something that he was holding in his hands and she raised an eyebrow. What's that? Again, confusion stole his face as he blinked at her before he looked where she was pointing. Oh. He grinned, scratching the back of his head sheepishly as he stretched out his hand to give it to her. Thought I'd deliver your mail. You went through our mailbox? He shrugged. Yeah, so? She shook her head, smiling. Never mind. Reading the front of the envelope told her that it was addressed to her. The back had the Hokage's signature and seal, and she quickly began opening it with Naruto peering at it. Flourishing the parchment, her green eyes swept over the writing swiftly. Her jaw dropped. Naruto, seeing this, and haven't getting the chance to read what it said, began begging her to tell him what it said. I'm required to head to the Hokage office for a debrief. What? Naruto cried. Why didn't I get one? I mean, we're a team. Sakura shook her head. I don't know. It doesn't say it's a mission though. Her eyes widened and Naruto, once again, begged her to tell him what it was. It's to do with the Shinigami. Looking up to stare him squarely in the eyes, she whispered hoarsely out, I've been suggested for the program. Sakura moved robotically towards the Hokage tower, shock still surging through her system. Her stomach wasn't crying out for food like it had been when she had woken up. Instead, it felt like it was full of butterflies. She traced her eyes over the contents of the letter again as her feet pressed against the gravel of the dirt path, the walkway relatively full of citizens due to it being the middle of the day. Naruto had given her a lot of grief as soon as she had told him 3 hours ago, and he refused to believe that he wasn't chosen. He had gone home several times to check his mail, just in case there was a mistake. Even offering to pay for his meal wasn't good enough, the end was near if he refused ramen, and somehow made his mood even more sour than before. He wasn't blaming Sakura, just disappointed that he hadn't received the letter. Yet, he was adamant that the postman must have lost it or something. He had actually dragged her to the post office just before she was meant to leave to meet at the tower at 10. Now alone, as her teammate was busy doing something else, she felt smaller than ever as she approached the tower. The building itself wasn't ominous, just the knowledge that she was going to be even further involved in the Shinigami business was. What a privilege, though. Her parents had been surprisingly happy about it, having believed the Shinigami as heroes for saving Konoha, so they were more than eager to let Sakura attend the debrief. Pushing open the front doors, the Pinkette stepped into the lobby, none of the ninja within glancing in her direction as she swerved through the desks and made her way to the staircase. It seemed to take forever and no time at all as well before she found herself out front of the Hokage's office. She hovered her fingers over the silver handle, swallowing. Why was she hesitating? It was a great opportunity and would give her the chance to learn more about a different culture. Furrowing her brow in confidence, Sakura opened the door, feeling cool air flush against her warm, sweating brow and coming face to face with several people she knew. Tenten, Niji, Kiba and Akamaru, Ino and Shikamaru. They sat to the right side of the room, with a certain number of Shinigami to the left, facing them, not even glancing in her direction as she slowly and quietly took a seat beside Kiba, the letter still clutched in her hand. Her heart pounded against her ribcage as she looked down the line, seeing some very different expressions on each of the faces beside her. Many looked confident, and she wondered why the hell they weren't nervous. Tensing her legs and forming a fist with one of her hands, she attempted to relax into her seat, ready to hear what the debriefing was about. Tsunade, who had been watching her as soon as she opened the door, closed her eyes and sighed. Things were finally getting underway. The council had been informed of every ninja allocated for the mission, as well as the consequences of the training, and how it would affect the rest of Konoha. That's why only recently released ninja were nominated. However, there were other reasons that went along for why these ones were chosen. She stiffened her laced fingers before she opened her eyes, revealing the warm color of honey. We'll begin. The room suddenly became even tenser as the ninja side waited in anticipation for their role in the program. As you already know, due to one of our Jounin mishap about spilling the beans of this operation, for the past 2 months, the council, myself and the Shinigami have been attempting to create an alliance. With this alliance is a new program, Ninja Training in the Arts of Shinigami. Niji and Kiba shifted in excitement, the former able to contain his joy a little more skillfully than the latter. You 7 have been nominated by Shinigami who believe you would do well in this program. Pride swelled in Sakura at those words. For once, since she started as a genin, she felt as though she could make a difference, a good one, and not be left behind like so many times before. She clenched her hands, feeling anxious about the topic now. Despite this having a lot of consequences to it, which she knew was going to be explained, she just wanted to leave already and start training. The thought was beyond thrilling. What their reasons are for choosing you have been disclosed to myself and the council. Chuji Akimichi and Shino Aburain were also nominated, but both of them are unable to participate. Chuji due to his clan and Shino due to his ability, and the inevitable progress of the training, they were both removed from the program. What? Kiba whispered, though his words were heard clearly. Akamaru yipped as well. Tsunade paused, shifting her gaze to the Inuzuka. You got a problem with that? The brunette closed his mouth abruptly, anger flaring in his eyes as he relaxed into his seat like before. Good. Now. The door suddenly flung open and two vibrantly colored people tumbled in, the green squishing the orange. It was Naruto and Lee. Grunting in pain, the blonde hoisted himself up, with the help of Lee, and grabbed his head, then rubbing it better. Granny Tsunade! What's going on here? Why wasn't I chosen? Or Lee? His voice shattered the eerie silence that was there moments before like a glass breaking under heavy contact. It was loud, deafening. Tsunade's eyes twitched at the knucklehead's voice, and she gingerly pressed a fingertip to her temple. If you keep quiet, then it would be explained. Naruto instantly closed his mouth, though it was obvious he wanted to say much more. Beside him, Lee remained obediently silent, his posture straight as he was in the presence of high stature. Byakuya rose from his seat fluidly, leaving Sakura and Ino almost drooling, and took a step forward. You have all been watched and studied by us, but, as mentioned before, only certain ninja could be given the chance to accept the offer to be in the program. His penetrating onyx eyes kept Naruto's lips sealed. You too, he gestured minutely to the two brightly colored genin, have a lot of energy within you already, your chakra. So? Naruto finally burst out. Wouldn't that make us good in being a Shinigami? Hitsugaya snorted in his seat beside Aizen, his arms and legs crossed. You got a problem, shorty? The 10th Shinigami captain's eyebrow twitched at the name, and he glared venomously in Naruto's direction. For starters, I'm older than you, boy, and the fact that you don't even remember our race is more than enough reason not to accept you. Naruto propelled back slightly in shock at the words, having not hearing such harsh things against him in a while now. Anger fueled him quickly, his expression morphing to anger as he took a stand. However, Sakura was soon in front of him, her hand on his forearm, holding him back. Naruto, she soothed. On the contrary, Byakuya continued as though the little spat before never happened, the fact that you have too much chakra within you is a problem. This involves the science of the program. Listen carefully. His tone was dominating. Everyone went silent in seconds as he turned to the rest of the ninja waiting in anticipation. The energy used in Shinigami practices is different from yours. At first, it was thought that it would not be possible for a ninja to be trained, but after analyzing the components of your energy, we found hints of our own in yours. This will be enough to harness more Riryoku, our energy, from you. Adult ninja were not chosen specifically because they have both too much skill and too much chakra. The training program intends to convert your chakra into Riryoku. Therefore, the more you have, the longer the process will take. You two have too much chakra and we have too little time. Wait, Sakura shook her head, waving her hands in the air. Shikamaru, beside her, nodded, seeing the predicament. Is there a problem? Byakuya asked. His voice sent shivers down the pinkette's spine, and she found it difficult to find her voice when he locked his gaze on her. He was watching her, waiting for her to talk. Don't stuff it up, Sakura. Converting chakra to Riryoku, would this affect how we perform jutsus? Byakuya paused, the silence thickening in the room. The Shinigami behind him, Shikamaru noted, seemed to smile as soon as she asked. Yes. It would. All 7 of them, not including Naruto and Lee, who had taken a seat by the door at some point, sagged their shoulders. Niji did his more delicately though. How much? Shikamaru queried, his lidded eyes narrowing. The Shinigami, Hitsugaya, Aizen, Ikimaru and Soifan, seemed to stretch their smirks a smidgen. Byakuya took in a breath, predicting a destroyed room as soon as he would finish his sentence. It's a decision between ninja and Shinigami. There was literally a moment which was the calm before the storm. What? Niji, the only one who seemed to have regained his senses, hissed, baring his teeth much like Kiba would when riled up. The Inuzuka would no doubt go nuts as soon as he soaked in the situation. It's as I said. It's a one-way trip. Decide, ninja or Shinigami. Ino suddenly burst out into tears, burying her head into her hands as she wept away, raising her legs to press them against her chest and hug them tightly. Sakura felt her eyes prick as well, tears threatening to break the dam. What? She whispered, choking back a sob as she tensed in her seat. Tenten's jaw was pretty much on the floor, and she was scrambling to come to her senses. Shikamaru was pissed, managing to keep his anger in check however, much like Niji was able to do. Kiba, though, looked ready to explode. In fact, he did. What? You expect us to give up our past life? Everything we've learned and been taught by our parents and teachers. That's bullshit. His face was crimson red, his spit flying everywhere, as he yelled at the calm and stoic Shinigami who had delivered the news. Naruto joined in the row. The words of anger were tossed at the Shinigami from all directions, but none seemed fazed by it. They expected it, as did Tsunade. You were chosen because you were thought to be good enough to represent your village, Aizen said, his voice somehow managing to slice through all the heated one-sided arguments in the room. You've been nominated as the most likely applicants to survive and excel through Shinigami training by Shinigami captains themselves. He paused, his brown eyes scouring over the many faces that were glaring back at him. Do not make us go back on our decisions, nor insult us by hinting that who we chose were obviously not to the standards we thought them to be. Ino, the one who had been spending a good amount of time with him, felt pride begin to swell inside of her once more. She felt confidence bubble within her as she listened to Aizen's words. There was silence, and the moment was taken for the message and compliment to sink in. Naruto, however, still looked peeved, and he growled as he pushed Lee out and slammed the door. Sakura and Tsunade shook their heads at his stubborn attitude, knowing that he wasn't going to stop there. Any questions? Byakuya asked. His words rang like a dull throb in the room. So, we can't perform any techniques that involve jutsus? Tenten muttered. Is it still actually possible to be a Shinigami but still possess ninja abilities? The concept hasn't been properly researched, due to certain hounding on our scientist's back, Aizen answered, casting Tsunade a meaningful glance, and she muffled a snort of laughter. But you are welcome to find out, if you want to risk it. Theoretically, it might be possible to have Riryoku react the same way chakra can, so all that you would need to do is train your body to perform your abilities with Riryoku. Tenten, and a few others, sighed in relief. Aizen shrugged. Theoretically. I am a part of a clan, Niji stated, his arms crossed and jaw tight. Wouldn't this conversion affect my ability? He spoke with distaste. You are of the Hyuga clan, Byakuya said, his tone creating it as a rhetorical question. You possess the Byakugan, do you not? Niji nodded stiffly. Your Kekkei Genkai is a bloodline trait, meaning it is a part of your body and is, to an extent, a necessary function. Riryoku is a part of your body as well and would then be able to merge with your ability quicker. However, pain can be inevitable. It's recommended you make the flow to your eyes a slow and steady process. That's a chakra-related ability, and requires jutsu. What you're saying is that it can work the same way even with Riryoku? Shikamaru asked. Byakuya tilted his head slightly, in a gesture of affirmation. How is this different from a normal jutsu? Because they aren't a necessity of life. To you maybe not, but to us they are, Sakura replied hotly. She then cursed herself inwardly for speaking against the man in front of her. He eyed her carefully, as though waiting to see if she'd react again. As I said, it can be theoretically possible, but the process will take double the time. How long does it take to convert chakra? Tenten asked, resting her elbows on her knees as she leaned forward. Several years. Years? Kiba shouted, shooting up from his seat. Ikemaru chuckled. Of course. We never said it was gonna be easy. Shut up you, the Inuzuka snarled. The Shinigami's smile widened considerably at the demand. He did not keep his mouth closed. There is an easier way to gain Riryoku though, if you don't want to train fair, 6 or 7 years. Niji gave him a suspicious look. Aizen, at the same time, muttered something to Ikemaru, whose smile seemed to diminish a fraction before it widened again. What is it? The Hyuga asked for everyone. Ta-da, of course. Forget it. Nah. No way. Too much trouble. Ino fought the urge to say, came pretty close to dying yourself, Shikamaru, but luckily retained herself. Granted, she probably would have been able to get away with saying it as he was her teammate, but a joke about that day would definitely have been a bad idea, considering since Shikaku had died, the genius had been showing anger and frustration all the time. However, with his skill he was able to show said anger through his strides and sentences, rather than his fists. Ikemaru shrugged. Was just a suggestion. A crap one if you asked me, Kiba whispered to Akamaru on his head as he retook his seat. He grunted as Sakura nudged him to be quiet. 6 or 7 years, then? Niji mused. His eyes were focused hard on Jin and Aizen before he shifted his gaze to Byakuya. He was contemplating. Before you decide, Hitsugaya started, drawing attention to himself. Ino and Sakura's boy alert side of their brains began ringing again, just like when they first saw Byakuya. We'd like to know, if you accept, why you accepted. You mean we get a choice? Tenten smiled, sitting upright in her seat at the notion. Hitsugaya put his eyes on her, she shifted, and then nodded curtly. It's recommended that you do not have a choice, however, Tsunade cut in. Everyone looked to her this time, and she unlaced her fingers. Shikamaru, said Chun and paid attention. You do not get a choice though. Ino gaped. Shikamaru, himself, remained to appear unaffected though confusion swam in his mind. He was thinking, trying to figure out why he didn't get a choice, and what it therefore meant. Shikamaru, your skills are highly valuable, this the Shinigami know, but I've decided that you shall remain here, in Konoha, was Tsunade's explanation. No, Ino half-sobbed, latching onto the frowning Chunin's arm tightly so that he couldn't be torn from her. Please! He has to go. He's… First of all, Yamanaka, how do you know he wants to go? Furthermore, he is of more value here, in Konoha, than in Soul Society. So you're using him? And how do you know he wants to stay? Ino cried out, rising from her seat. Shikamaru, the topic of the argument, remained silent. This isn't fair. This was not my decision, Yamanaka, though my vote did go for him to remain here. It is what the council decided just now. Well, the council are assholes. Rude. Snob. She counterattacked, looking to Aizen through tears as soon as she spoke. He nodded lightly, as if congratulating her for some reason. Relief flooded her system as Ino gave a crooked smile in return. She had basically repeated what he had thought about the council as well, only he was more formal about it. Yamanaka. Rein in your tongue before your chance to join this program is withdrawn, Tsunade replied seriously, anger edging into her tone. Aizen and Byakuya opened their mouths to respond to that warning, but they were both effectively cut off as Ino took control again. It's too late, Hokage. I'm officially a Shinigami trainee, so I don't fall under your jurisdiction. She shouted hotly, warm tears trailing down her cheeks as she breathed in and out heavily. There was a stunned silence as everyone else let her words sunk in. She had a point. She, at that moment, as soon as she said it, was not a ninja anymore. Though, based on technicalities, she was not yet enrolled as a Shinigami, but her point was made nonetheless. Ino, Shikamaru started only to be cut off. Shikamaru. Ino heaved, her blue, glassy eyes narrowed on Tsunade before she moved them to her teammate. Shikamaru, I promise I will take your place in Soul Society and avenge the death of your father. Dedication and love towards her friend was embedded fully into her voice as she spoke. So much emotion was in it that it made the dam within Sakura to break, and she began tearing, though they were tears of mirth. Shikamaru was stoned, staring up at the blonde beauty in disbelief. Ino. Please. I know you wanted to. More hot water slid down her cheeks and she breathed in shakily. I know you wanted to go to Soul Society to find a way to destroy the monsters who killed your father. Please. Let me take that goal onto my shoulders. It's too heavy, he said slowly, his heart rampaging in his chest. No, it won't be, Niji announced. Sitting on the other side of Ino, he gave the genius a nod. My reason for accepting this opportunity to go to Soul Society was not only to give honor to my clan and village, nor honor to myself, but to do something of the opposite. I intended to gain the abilities of a Shinigami so I can avenge Hinata. I can help Ino carry the burden, Shikamaru. The room went quiet. Shikamaru, a lax smile crawling onto his face, made a sound of relief as he looked away, shaking his head. He shaded his eyes with a hand, his shoulders shaking before he grabbed Ino by her own and pulled her into a hug as he rose. His arms wrapped around her small frame tightly, he whispered in her ear, thank you. So, Niji Hyuga and Ino Yamanaka have accepted, Soifan summarized, crossing her legs and arms. Anyone else? Feeling powerful at the scene she had just witnessed with friendship, Sakura felt suddenly torn. She longed to go to Soul Society, to make a difference, to be worthy to Konoha, but yet she'd be leaving Naruto behind, who was still recovering from the betrayal of Sasuke. But she sighed, dropping her head, her fingers scrunching the letter in her hand. She didn't know what to do. Sign me up! Kiba shouted, Akamaru barking in agreement. Niji smirked. I was wondering when you'd say that. Some type of unspoken message was passed between the two as they locked eyes. Tenten perked an eyebrow. How would that work with a dog? Kiba paused, holding up a finger in her direction, but found he had nothing to say. Oh yeah? He frowned, shifting to Byakuya. So? He crossed his arms. The Shinigami who nominated you has plans for you, plans that no one else knows but them and Captain Yamamoto. They are confident that you would still be able to become a Shinigami, even with a canine as your companion, was the monotonous reply. Kiba bared his teeth as he grinned. Hell yes! He punched the air, then began doing a small dance. Tenten shrugged, giggling, shooting to her feet and holding up a hand. Sounds like fun. My reason? Simple. I love weapons. It was like Sakura suddenly shrunk, or became miniaturized, as every head in the room veered in her direction. She felt like a fly on the wall, or something special on display, and that they were inspecting her for any faults. Well, she did. She had plenty of faults. She had no bloomin' idea what to do. Come on, billboard brow. Ino begged, her hands together. Just like old times. Sakura cracked a half smile, thinking back to when they were kids, before Sasuke came in between them. It was fun. She was fun to be with. And if she said a single word, she could quite possibly get those times back. How attracting. She was tempted. So tempted. But then Naruto and Kakashi flitted through her mind. Kakashi already voiced his suspicions with Shinigami to the both of them, and while it was true that their arrival put the ninja regions into danger, if the danger got through the front gate, that is, Sakura couldn't help but disagree with him. The Shinigami. They were good. They had to be. She didn't doubt her sensei's judgment, she took it on board, but she wanted to do something, decide something for herself, and apparently becoming a ninja was a mistake. She was always in the way, always being saved. She thought she had passed that phase during the Chunin exams, but she guessed she was wrong. Sakura looked up, meeting Byakuya's gaze, and instantly she was reminded of Sasuke's expressions, the ones he often gave her if he was irritated with her. Though, as she looked deeper into the Shinigami's eyes, she could see something else. Conflict. Confusion. She blinked and the emotions were gone. Shaking her head, she decided she didn't see it after all. As she moved her eyes across the row of Shinigami, she analyzed them closely but quickly. Soifan merely raised an eyebrow and Aizen had smiled gently in return. Hitsugaya, however, looked to be getting a little impatient, but his eyes, as their gaze matched, seemed to stare down into her. Feeling exposed, she snapped her vision to Ikamaru, whose smile only widened. He was an interesting one that she'd enjoy working with, if at all, in the future. Then again, he was also the one she didn't quite trust either. She believed that Kakashi was right to be suspicious of him as well. Thoughts swarmed in her mind so that it was difficult to think. The others, they had something they were fighting for, either that, or they had nothing to lose. She didn't have anything, besides Konoha, to fight for, and in a way she had everything to lose. It was like she was walking towards a light as she reached a decision. I'm sorry, Naruto. Kakashi-sensei. I'll go. My reason, she shrugged. I want to protect, be worth something. Tsunade nodded in approval at the pinkette, and as everyone went to retake their seats, Sakura sighed in relief at the stripping of limelight. The blonde spoke up again. There is one more person that I'd like add to the program, if that is possible. She titled her head to the Shinigami. Aizen answered. Who is this person? Shizen, Tsunade hinted. Her apprentice ran to the door and opened it, peering out as she spoke words to someone. She returned to her position behind the desk swiftly enough, and the door was pushed open entirely. Danzo stepped through, his large build filling up the entire doorway. He then moved out of the side. Several of the ninja-turned Shinigami sighed in relief that it wasn't him, and revealed a young boy behind him, his pale white skin contrasting with his black clothes and hair. He held a smile on his face, but one glance was enough for anyone to tell that it was fake. He stepped in, his black eyes surveying the room. Sakura and Ino both raised their eyebrows in half surprise and disbelief. Hello, my name is Sai, he greeted, waving warmly to the occupants in the room. Sai. Sai, Ikamaru pondered, his fingers cupping his chin as he directed his gaze to the ceiling as though thinking of something. Was he nominated? Soifan shook her head, as did Hitsugaya. No, the second captain replied. Tsunade sighed. Danzo. Explain. It was clear she had not been informed on who the applicant was. I believe it would be wise to have someone who I think would do well in the program to be entered. That is not your decision, she hissed out. Letting the Shinigami decide everything for you, Lady Tsunade? She slammed a hand down onto her desk, effectively making everything on it tremble. Never. They came to us about the list of applicants, and we cleared them. Sai was not on the list. They haven't seen him train. Then where has he been? Have you been hiding something from us, Danzo? Her tone was accusing and he knew it. He glared at her, his eyelashes moving against the bandages over the one eye. I believe you thought we had not seen him train, Aizen interrupted before a word fight broke out. In fact, one of us has. For one so young, he's quite skilled already in combat, preceding several of these new Shinigami inabilities. Sakura felt her heart flutter in excitement as she was referred to as a Shinigami. Danzo, Tsunade hissed. You didn't answer my question, I believe, the council member responded with subdued irritation. Can he be entered in the program? The Shinigami, all of them, analyzed Sai, who remained completely nonplussed as their eyes roamed over him. The others waited in expectant silence for their new superiors to reach a decision. Do you think you will be able to keep up in Shinigami study, despite being well trained prior? Soifan asked. Sai mutely nodded. You will need to start from the beginning again. He nodded again. She sighed, glancing at the other Shinigami before shrugging. As long as he keeps up, I suppose. Though other ninja won't be happy about it. They won't if they never know, Danzo replied cryptically. And Naruto. Please, he sobbed, falling to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Please don't go. Sakura swallowed,